everyone, so today I wanted to talk about how Mariah Carey dominated the 90s and kind of just do a little career deep dive on her. And so if you guys wanted to skip right to the video, I will have a timestamp on the screen right here to where you guys can go to. And now onto a couple quick disclaimers. Number one, I'm gonna try and cover the big points in her career. Obviously, I'm not gonna be able to cover every little event she went to or song or whatever it is. I'm going to try my best. I'm a huge fan. I know a lot of her. I know that I'm going to be missing out some stuff. And then the next thing is, sorry for any background noise or dust particles that may occur throughout this video. I'm gonna try to have pretty much everything that I referenced to make this video mentioned linked down below in my description. It might be too much, but I'll try to find a way to have everything there for the most part. If I have anything else that ever gets added, check down below. I might have a pinned comment. Mariah Carey was born on March 27th, 1970 in Huntington, New York to Alfred Roy Carey, an aeronautical engineer, and Patricia Carey, an opera singer. And she was the youngest of three. And also the last name Carey was adopted by her Venezuelan grandfather, Francisco Nunez, after he emigrated to New York. And so basically, growing up was difficult for her, and she says in her book, "Before my mother and father found their marriage unbearable, they lived together in Brooklyn Heights. Though the neighborhood had a stream of bohemians arrive as early as 1910, and the 1950s brought in a wave of urban activists, liberal folks with money who loathed the suburbs in the 1970s, it was still a pretty eclectic mix of mostly working and middle-class families. It was pre-yuppie and ungentrified. If there was a tolerant place for a young mixed-race family in that era, Brooklyn Heights was probably the closest you could come to it. Throughout my childhood, I would live in many obscure places, mostly on Long Island, and feel very much like a castaway on this island, off the island of Manhattan. Both of my parents worked very hard so we could live in neighborhoods where we could glimpse that elusive better life and feel safe. Conventional wisdom, however, suggests that better and safe are synonymous with white. We were not a conventional family. Was it better to live in a place where my white mother would often walk alone through the front door first, ahead of my black father with her mixed kids for their safety? What does that do to the psyche of a man who is supposed to be the head of a household? How can such a man keep his family safe, and what does such an indignity signal to his black son?" And her mother's mom disowned her due to her marriage with Mariah's father. And in her book she says, "Time rolled by after my parents' divorce, and eventually my grandmother allowed my mother to visit with her granddaughter, but only her youngest granddaughter. I was a 12-year-old little girl and didn't quite understand why she only invited me. Looking back, I suspect it was because I was blondish and very fair for a mixed kid. I didn't raise much suspicion to the culturally untrained eye. I was too young to know how my mother and her mother interacted with each other, and I never knew what happened between them at that point. Was there an apology from Pat's mother for disowning her daughter and withholding family from her? Did she reckon with her racism? Was there forgiveness? I don't know. What I do remember is that she was stiff and formal. And then she went through a lot of racism growing up. She mentioned whenever she drew a portrait of her father using a brown crown, they laughed at her like she was using a green crown, like all of the teachers and stuff. And she mentioned that her father went to a play that she was in, and he goes to give her flowers and everyone is staring at them, and then she never got a major role at that camp again. And then she also talks about the story where these white girls invited her to their house for a sleepover basically, and then they cornered her and they started calling her the N-word. She was yelling out for help and nobody ever helped her. And also she kind of felt like she never fit in due to being biracial and stuff like that. And she said that she loved her father's side of the family, but she didn't really see them that often. And regarding that, in her book she says, "Until I was about 6 years old, my father hadn't spoken to his father in years. He was an only child and had a different mother than my grandfather's other children, and as warm and welcoming as Nana Ruby and her house were, and from what I could see, she showered my father with love. Still, she was not his mother. Perhaps he felt like a bit of an outsider with him. I think he made an effort to mend things with his father for the sake of his own children, as well as himself. He must have realized how isolated I was, living with just my mother in an all-white community. That was becoming increasingly hostile to me. I needed to know some family, and I am forever grateful for it because that house was a warm place, bustling with family life. I loved it there. The whole neighborhood loved my grandpa. He was a regular, fun-loving guy with a hearty laugh, wore crew socks with his slide sandals. He had a little urban vineyard in his backyard in Queens. Inside the house with my cousins, I may have felt a part of something. Outside with kids in the neighborhood was a different story. It was always a different story with me. Even though my cousins didn't live on this mostly black and Hispanic block in Queens, they were known because our grandpa was that guy in the neighborhood. When we were outside playing, they'd introduce me to the other kids as their cousin, and some kid would invariably say, "She's not your cousin, she's white." "Yes, she is our cousin." They would snap right back. Who my mother was, who my father was, to whom I belonged was always in question. Hanging out with my cousins wasn't as heavy. I was part of a group. I was part of them, and they defended me. Yes, she is. It was that simple. And it was so important. My black cousins were the only cousins I knew when I was a little girl, because my mother's side of the family, the white side, had disowned her. I had no way of having a real relationship with any of them. Looking back now, I can see that in my early years there was significant neglect. For one, there were the people my mother let be around me, particularly my violent brother, my troubled sister, and their sketchy cohorts. My hair was rooted to no one. No one did my hair. No one knew how. We didn't have conditioner or cream rinse, as it was called back in the day, at my mother's house. And she also mentioned that she moved around 13 times and she was often left alone because her mother was working and her brother just like left her alone. And she grew up poor and that she had 3 shirts in rotation. In our middle class community, I was extremely self-conscious of living with a shabby wardrobe in a small, dilapidated house. However, by the time I entered high school, I had developed some new survival skills. At that age, I didn't have any control over where I lived, but I could do something about what I wore. One of the few advantages of moving so many times was that I got a fresh crop of kids to try to fit in with. One go round, I managed to scrounge together a few girlfriends and convince them we should have a fashion swapping system where we'd exchange our trendiest pieces with one another and coordinate them differently. This gave the illusion that I had a more expansive and up-to-date wardrobe than I could ever afford. In terms of her relationship with her siblings, she has 2 siblings, Morgan and Allison, who are like 9 and 10 years older than her. And so in terms of a little context, she basically says, through the years, both my sister and brother have put me on the chopping block, sold lies to any gossip rag or trashy website that would buy or listen. They have attacked me for decades, but when I was 12 years old, my sister drugged me with Valium, offered me a pinky nail full of cocaine, afflicted me with 3rd-degree burns, and tried to sell me out to a pimp. Something in me was arrested by all that trauma. That is why I often say I'm eternally 12. I'm still struggling through that time. My sister and brother clearly couldn't stand each other, but their deep resentment towards me was a constant silent menace, simmering right below the surface. I was the 3rd and youngest child, and our parents were divorced by the time I was 3. I was what they considered a golden child. Lighter hair, lighter skin, and a lighter spirit. I lived with our mother, and they were exiled from each other and us. They existed in a different kind of pain, absorbing whatever hostility, underloved, troubled mixed kids do in any neighborhood, black or white. I believe they believed I was passing. There I was with my blondish hair, living with our white mother in what they considered a safe white neighborhood. Their resentment toward me was perhaps the one thing they had in common. They seemed to bound in that bitterness. I actually understood why they were angry and hateful toward me, but at the time, I couldn't fathom why every year they just had to ruin Christmas.
Also, something worth noting is that she took care of her nephew Sean, and like she put him through law school and everything. Her sister went through a lot and she got pregnant young and everything. Really read the book to like kind of understand everything. But yeah, this is something that I figured was worth noting, and I can't believe that I forgot to mention it.
In terms of our relationship with her father, she says, my father took surgical care with everything he did. His lifestyle had a truly austere quality. Our military barracks, pathshall, and monastery. His kitchen was small and impeccably kept. The contents of his pantry were precisely indexed by size and category. There was no room for extravagance or waste of any kind in his home. And she also basically said that he didn't really encourage her career as a singer just because it was an entire thing of he wanted her to go for something that was going to be more safe because of, you know, what her siblings went through. And then also, you know, he was more strict on her siblings than he actually was on her. She told this one story about how she just started singing. Then they expected, you know, the father to start yelling at her, but he didn't. She felt like at certain points she was like protected from what they had to go through because, you know, they would say like, oh, don't say that around Mariah. And I believe I read something in her book of her mom saying like, oh, this is mine, you're not gonna screw this one up, you know, referring to Mariah. So that's also something worth noting. And then basically she said like she was kind of just the accompaniment to whatever he was doing. He didn't have that many luxuries in life. She said that they would tell each other, you know, see you every Sunday. And sometimes he just wouldn't show up for their dates and she didn't really know why. And then she kind of talks about that in a song called Bye Bye, which is something that I feel is very heartfelt as well. He also did say that Vision of Love came out and he was like really amazed by it, basically playing it for him. He said they talk occasionally whenever the charm bracelet era was happening. He did get sick and get cancer during that, so she did go and visit him and they talked a lot and kind of like resolved their issues then really. And she said like she thought that he wasn't really following her career like that, but she went to go visit him and saw like he had like newspaper clippings and stuff like that, and so that's something that meant a lot to her. And so whenever he was in the hospital, she would bring him sunflowers because those were the only flowers that he like wasn't allergic to and didn't make him sick. And then he ended up passing away due to a rare form of cancer, and so on the album there's a song called Sunflowers for Alfred Roy that is dedicated to him. In terms of her relationship with her mother, she essentially said it's complicated. She is really grateful to her though for always encouraging her as a singer, and she said that she learned a lot from her and stuff, basically because she was a Juilliard trained opera singer, and she remembers, you know, sitting around the piano with her and just singing scales and stuff, and her mom would take her around other musicians so she would learn from them as well. And she also tells a story of her mom singing this opera in Italian, like this Rigoletto, and basically she kept messing up on it, and then Mariah sang it in perfect Italian just at 3. And so yeah, she definitely did learn from her mom as a singer for sure, and I think that she took that and kind of improved upon that later. So she definitely credits her with that for sure and says that they always really had a connection through music.
Now your mom was a vocal coach and an opera singer. Aside from her, did you have any formal training? Did she train you?
There was always music in my house when I was growing up, and my mother was vocalizing a lot and doing different vocal exercises, and she was also teaching voice a lot in the house. So as a little girl, sometimes I would, you know, listen to her as she was teaching her students. So I would pick up little things, and every now and then we would get together and do a little vocal exercise or something, but really I stopped doing that by the time I got to be around 12, and I sort of branched off on my own and did my own thing.
And she did tell us one story though, and basically they were like driving in the car, I believe, and then Somebody's Watching Me came on, and then, you know, Michael Jackson loved on the song, and so her mom was like singing along to in like operatic voice, and Mariah laughed, and then her mother was like, oh, you'll never be half the singer that I am. And so that is something that kind of like always stuck with her. But basically she appreciates what she learned from my mother as a singer, and then also she would always want to be a singer, right? And then she would always say, if I make it, and her mom always said, don't say that, say when I make it. But also in the book she says, our relationship is a prickly robe of pride, pain, shame, gratitude, jealousy, and aberration and disappointment. A complicated love tethers my heart to my mother's. In terms of her relationships with her family, I would definitely recommend you guys read the book, just because there's so much detail and, you know, what they put her through that I can't really go over in this video because I would be here all day long. So you should definitely read that out just to get more in depth on it. But that's kind of like a basic analysis on her relationship with her family at this point. I was always so scared as a little girl, and music was my escape. My house was heavy, weighed down with yelling and chaos. When I sang in a whispery tone, it calmed me down. I discovered a quiet, soft, light place inside my voice, a vibration in me that brought me sweet relief. My whisper singing was my secret lullaby to myself. She also recalls that there was this girl named Maureen who told her that there was music in her voice, and that's something that she kind of like always kept with her. So yeah, music was really what got her through it. And then whenever she was younger, she really excelled at like creative writing, for example. She would always be in the advanced classes for that, and so she always would be writing poetry, and she actually said that one of her teachers thought that she was like plagiarizing it or whatever. But yeah, she started writing songs when she was in high school, and some of those songs would end up on her very first album. In high school, she would also get 500 hours of beauty school, and she often didn't show up to high school just because she was working on demos at the time, and so due to that she was given the nickname Mirage. And so her brother would pay for her demo, and so she would meet Gavin Christopher, and eventually she would be introduced to Ben Margulies working on the demo that she did with him. And then after she graduated, she moved to Manhattan, and she lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with like 4 other girls while she was working the various jobs to pay the rent, such as being a waitress or a co-check girl and things like that she basically said she would always get fired from because she wasn't really any good. She was still doing work as a demo singer on the side, being a background singer, and so due to that, when you're in that industry, people are always recommending you. And so basically she ended up landing a gig as a background singer for Brenda K. Starr, and she said like Brenda was really nice to me, she always helped me out a lot. She would always introduce Mariah to people and say like, hey, like you have to listen to Mariah, like she writes a lot of songs, she's great. So basically Brenda tells Mariah that she really wants to take her to this party for WTG Records, and it was an entire thing of these 3, you know, big men in the industry coming together and making company. Mariah was hesitant on going basically because she had a deal brewing with Warner Brothers at the time. They were going to use some of her songs on a demo for a movie that was happening, and so she was kind of going to go with them. But then she said that she wanted to introduce her to Jerry Greenberg, who at the time was the head of Atlantic, and so she was like, okay, I'm interested. So basically they get to the party and Brenda's talking her up, and so whenever she goes to hand him Mariah's demo tape, Tommy Mottola snatches it, and at the time Tommy was the chairman and CEO of Sony Music Entertainment, and this was going to be parent of the Columbia label. And so he takes the demo, and then he goes to his limo, he plays it, he's blown away, couldn't believe that was Mariah. And so essentially he comes back to the party to find her, she's not there. Then he finds her like a week or 2 later, leaves a message on her answering machine, they have the meeting, and he would sign her to Columbia Records in December of 1988. And now there was a bidding war between Columbia and Warner Brothers at the time, and she basically said that the reason that she went with Columbia is because she felt like Tommy really believed in her as much as she believed in herself as a singer and respected her vision. So after she gets signed to Columbia, she started working on her album. Like I said, she was already working with Ben Margulies prior to the album. They did the demo, which had 7 songs on there. Originally they planned that Margulies was gonna produce the album, and then the label didn't let that happen because they wanted to have the album be successful. They paired her up with a bunch of big slick producers such as Rhett Lawrence, Narada Michael Walden, Rick Waite, and then she would also work with Walter F. and SCF as well. Vision of Love was going to be her debut single, and so this was like a mid-tempo R&B track. Vision of Love entered the US Billboard Hot 100 at number 73 during the week of June 2nd, 1990, and reached the chart summit 9 weeks later, and the song would be at number 1 for 4 consecutive weeks and was ranked 6th on the Hot 100 year-end chart. It also topped the Hot R&B Hip-Hop Songs for 2 weeks and Hot Adult Contemporary chart. In 2019, the RIAA certified the song platinum. The song would also go number 1 in Canada and New Zealand as well. It peaked at number 9 in Australia. In the UK, Vision of Love peaked at number 9. And so this was just something that really took the world by storm whenever it came out. And this is because it was different from what was popular at the time, with the main genres being rock and pop music. And even Mariah said that she was shocked at its popularity essentially.
I was surprised about Vision of Love because to me it was not what was going on musically at the time. It was a ballad. It was very kind of R&B influenced. It wasn't like a cute little pop ditty, so I was surprised at that.
And so I feel like the main reason that the song stands out is just the sheer vocal acrobatics that she's doing all the way throughout it. You have all this insane melisma going all over the track, and she just really took it to the next level with that. And then she's also showcasing her whistle register, which we have come to know and love from her, of course.
You turned out to
so this is just something that really took the world by storm, like I said, because it was different, because of the vocal chops and what she was doing on there. And you know, it made people look and say like, wow, who is Mariah Carey? And I feel like this is really something that is important for a debut single, and I feel like this is pretty representative of who she is as an artist. And this is just something that is mind-blowing to listen to. Like, occasionally I listen to the song and I'm just like, imagine this being your debut single, mind you. Your debut. Like, you're just starting off this strong. Some artists their entire career don't even have one song as strong as this, and it's only her debut single. Vision of Love received acclaim from critics who really complimented the vocals and also the lyrics as well. And so Bill Lamb from About.com stated that echoes of Whitney Houston's influence are evident, but the sheer power and sweeping highs are all Mariah's own. He added that Vision of Love is one of the best songs of the singer's recording career, and one of the most stunning debut releases ever by a pop recording artist. Billboard editor Bill Coleman noted further, it has all the necessary elements to propel newcomer to diva status. Infectious melodies, lush instrumentation, and vocal performance brimming with unbridled power and confidence. It has been credited with popularizing the use of melisma in contemporary popular music. The New Yorker named Vision of Love the Manicata of melisma for its and Carey's influence on pop and R&B singers and American Idol contestants. So Beyonce said that Vision of Love is what made her want to sing, and she was really fascinated by all the riffs and runs that she was doing throughout the song, and said that it was something that she really loves to incorporate it into her own music. Rihanna, Christina Aguilera, and Kelly Clarkson have stated Mariah as influential to them as well. Also, rapper Snoop Dogg and Tupac love the record as well. So her first televised performance of Vision of Love was at Arsenio Hall. On that, she says, Arsenio was more than a host. He had more than a late night show. It was a cultural event, a true black experience, or rather, it was a mainstream entertainment show seen through a black lens. Everyone watched it and talked about it everywhere. I will always be grateful and proud that it was on Arsenio's stage that most of America got to see my face, know my name, and hear my song for the first time. 4 days after she would do her first televised performance, she would appear at the 1990 NBA playoffs, where she would sing America the Beautiful. Love Takes Time would be the second single from the album, released on August 22nd, 1990, and this would be an adult contemporary ballad, and it debuted at number 73 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts. It reached number 1 in its 9th week on the chart, and it would spend 3 weeks at number 1. It topped every other Billboard chart for which it was eligible. In Canada, it was at number 2. It reached top 10 in Iceland and New Zealand, becoming a moderate top 20 hit in Australia and a top 40 hit in the UK and the Netherlands. And so in regards to information about the song, there's 2 stories that were told. One of them was that she finished the album, it was being mastered, and then she wrote Love Takes Time for her second album. She played it for them and they were like, no, this has to go on the first album, right? And so they made her go record it, and so she did, and that's why on some of the copies of the first album, Love Takes Time isn't listed, because it was literally added at the last minute. And then I also saw this interview that she did, which was really interesting, and she basically said like the label wanted a big pop ballad, and she was like, I know how to write that. I gave them Love Takes Time. It's gonna do what it needs to do.
You know, after Vision of Love and those songs which were on my demo, the label was like, well, we need some more pop ballads, so I wrote Love Takes Time. And a lot of people are like, oh, we love that song. I'm like, really? I wrote that in an hour, because it was like a directive, write something more in the pop vein, you know, in between pop and R&B.
Which is something that's really interesting to me. Overall, I really do love this track, and I'm really glad that it was included on the debut album, because I feel like it's something that just ties like a nice little bow on it, and I really do enjoy it. But I thought that was something that was really interesting overall. Someday would be the third single, released on November 28th, 1990, and it's a pop and new jack swing song. Alone in Love was going to be the B-side. In the US, it became Carey's third consecutive number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, staying there for 2 weeks. It also became her first song to top the Dance Club Songs chart, her second number 1 on the Radio Songs chart. It peaked at number 3 on the Hot R&B Hip Hop Songs chart, and number 5 on the Adult Contemporary chart. In Canada, Someday reached number 5. It also reached the top 5 in Iceland, the top 15 in New Zealand, top 40 in France and the UK, and the top 40 in Australia and Belgium. I Don't Wanna Cry would be the 4th single on the album, and it was released on March 19th, 1991, and it is going to be another pop and R&B ballad. In the US, the song debuted at number 50 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and it became her 4th consecutive number 1 hit on the Hot 100 chart, staying at the top for 2 weeks and making her the second act after the Jackson 5 in 1970 to have their first 4 singles reach number 1. I Don't Wanna Cry reached the top of the Hot 100 without any immediate promotion, which is really impressive, and the song would reach number 2 in Canada, number 3 in Cuba, number 10 in Panama, number 13 in New Zealand, and number 49 in Australia. There's Got to Be a Way would be the 5th and final single from the album, and it was only released in the UK on May 20th, 1991, where it would reach number 54 on the UK singles chart. And this is a socially conscious track, and it was something that got a mixed reception, as they complimented the vocals, but they felt like it was something that was too political. In terms of promotion for the album, Mariah would perform on a lot of programs such as Arsenio Hall, Oprah Winfrey, Good Morning America, Johnny Carson, Saturday Night Live, Showtime at the Apollo, Wogan. She would also have a performance at the Tattoo Club that she did, also performing Vision of Love on the Grammys, as well as other shows that she did, you know, in other countries as well. And she also did interviews to promote the record as well on various radio stations and things like that. And the label promoted this record very hard. I found a New York Times article article that kind of goes into the detail. I will read that. They say, Miss Carey, an attractive and able pop singer with a 5-octave range, was the ideal candidate to fill a hole in the company's artist roster. Although Sony has enjoyed some success in the last 2 years with female pop singers like Martika, Bazia, and Gloria Estefan, the company has lacked a big selling pop diva on the order of Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, Madonna, or Paula Abdul. For the would-be stars, Sony's top executives took an unusually active role. Mr. Mottola and Don Iiner, president of Columbia Records, personally selected the producers. Mr. Iiner, who had only recently joined Columbia after heading the promotion department at Arista Records, suggested Narada Michael Walden and Rick Wake. Each had crafted hit records for Arista's 2 biggest selling female pop singers, Whitney Houston and Taylor Dane respectively. Tommy told me, she's incredible. You just won't believe how good she is, Mr. Wake recalls. As far as he was concerned, it was the second coming. Mr. Mottola, the album's executive producer, declines to discuss his involvement in the making and marketing of Mariah Carey, calling such information proprietary. To give away our trade secrets would not be to my advantage, is all he will say. But he does say, when I heard and saw Mariah, there was absolutely no doubt she was in every way destined for stardom. Indeed, Columbia took meticulous care in fashioning a record capable of garnering maximum radio exposure. There's so much momentum and everyone was pushing so hard from every level, says Mr. Wake. There were so many decisions being made. Those decisions were largely concerned with how to present the singer in a commercially viable music setting. Although Miss Carey, whose mother was an opera singer and vocal coach, cites the rhythm and blues singer Gladys Knight and the gospel artist Shirley Caesar and the Clark sisters as primary influences, Mariah Carey bears the unmistakable stylistic stamp of Miss Houston, one of the biggest selling pop singers of the last decade. In fact, Miss Houston's own career may be feeling the squeeze of Miss Carey's success. Last season's album, I'm Your Baby Tonight, is selling at a slower pace than its 2 predecessors. Miss Carey and the composer Ben Margulies, with whom she had been writing songs since the age of 18, came up with the vocal material for the album. Released in June to generally favorable reviews, the record developed into a savvy but conservative collection of light dance tunes and torchy ballads. But even before the album was completed, the CBS marketing department began giving Miss Carey the same attention she was receiving in the studio. Months in advance, they began laying the groundwork for a long run on the pop charts. We had numerous meetings about Mariah way in advance of the album's release, says Jane Burke, the former director of marketing for CBS Records. The strategy was to create a pre-release buzz among record stores and radio stations. It was about carefully planting seeds in the industry and nurturing their development at every stage, Miss Burke says. It was very strategically planned. We went out on a limb and it was worth taking the risk. Columbia's program for Miss Carey was similar to one undertaken just a few months earlier by SBK Records on behalf of the vocal trio Wilson Phillips. Like Miss Carey, that group had also sold 4 million copies of its first album and had several hit singles. Charles Koppelman, the chairman of SBK, says such intensive campaigns can be costly but effective in establishing credibility. We needed to convince everybody that this is real music, Mr. Koppelman says of Wilson Phillips, adding that there are advantages to focusing promotional efforts on one artist. Using concentration rather than a scattergun approach, you can really sell major numbers that justify almost whatever you spend. For Miss Carey, the first step was to perform at the National Association of Recording Merchandisers Convention in Los Angeles last spring to introduce her to executives from the country's biggest record store chains. If Miss Carey had been unable to impress the crowd, her chances for a hit would have seriously been hindered. Howard Applebaum, vice president and head buyer of the 33-store Kemp Mill in the chain in Maryland, recalls Miss Carey's performance as good, not incredible. But he says that Columbia, which had primed the audience with a video presentation of Miss Carey, was still able to whip up tremendous excitement. The energy level in that room was astounding, Mr. Applebaum says of Columbia's buildup. Applebaum became more convinced of her potential a few weeks later when Miss Carey performed for the retailers and radio personnel in Philadelphia. The show was part of an unusual promotional swing, a 9-city tour Columbia organized for Miss Carey while soliciting orders for her album. Most labels send out tapes to salespeople and hope they listen, Miss Burke says. We wanted to make sure people listened to Mariah, so we sent her. It worked. After hearing Miss Carey perform a brief set, Mr. Applebaum for one increased his chain's orders for the album. The promotional tour also paid dividends, with radio stations Keith Knafley, program director at KMEL in San Francisco, boasts that his station was the first to play Miss Carey's debut single, Vision of Love. After hearing her perform, Miss Natalie, who has a reputation for picking hits, is the kind of program director whose playlist is closely watched by other stations. KMEL's decision to play the record and its subsequent success with the station's listener helped establish Miss Carey's commercial legitimacy. Once Mariah Carey was a hit, the label continued its financial push. The album has been featured in almost all the label's consumer advertisements. Columbia has also maintained a high profile for Mariah Carey in the industry, with up to 5 full-page ads in Billboard since the record's release. Store displays an expansive and effective way to reach consumers. Has also played an extensive part in Miss Carey's campaign. Some stores received thousands of dollars in merchandise in exchange for floor and window displays. Through packaging and videos, Miss Carey has also been able to solidify her reputation as a vocal talent, despite the fact that she has never toured. The visual element was very, very, very important. Part of exposing this artist, says Miss Burke. Pictures of Miss Carey crooning into an old-fashioned microphone were widely used in her promotion, on the back cover of her album, and in her first video, for Vision of Love. A spokesman denies published reports that the video clip cost as much as $450,000. What What we were selling was unmistakably about an artist who was a singer, Miss Burke says. Miss Carey was also booked on the Arsenio Hall show before the album was released. While still unknown, she sang on a broadcast of last year's NBA championship playoffs. Getting that kind of experience for a new artist is difficult. And Mr. Mottola is credited with using his considerable muscle to arrange the appearances. It is unusual, although not unheard of, for top executives at a large record company to take so much interest in a new artist. Clive Davis, the chairman of Arista Records, is considered the force behind Miss Houston's career, and Mr. Koppelman, whose SBK Records has launched some of the biggest new artists this year, including the rapper Vanilla Ice, who has been known to pick up the phone and call record stores to plug his acts. Great Expectations and Dollars also greeted Patti Smith, who left Columbia after her second album, which was a dud. The last female vocalist to get this kind of push from Miss Carey's company was Cyndi Lauper, a far more original singer, which is an L. They took an L with writing that. I had to say that really quickly. Miss Lauper's 1983 album, She's So Unusual, sold 4 million copies. A Night to Remember, just her third album, released last year, sold less than 500,000 copies. Also, it's worth noting that the video for Vision of Love was actually refilmed, and regarding this it says, after filming the video's first version, record label executives felt the result was subpar in comparison to the quality of the music. They scrapped the first video and refilmed it with director Andy Morahan, changing the plot, scenery, and imagery. After the word got out of the 2 videos, a Sony employee spoke to the press about Carey, saying how the special treatment really upset him. He felt they treated Carey differently from how they would another artist signed to the label, and that they viewed her as a higher priority. He also claimed that Carey was the reason they refilmed. They spent $200,000 on a video and Mariah doesn't like it. No big deal. Another employee estimated the figure of both videos at over $450,000. After the reports were made, Don Iner, the president of Sony, refuted the claims, calling them total bullshit. Although admitting, if we're going to take the time and effort that we did with Mariah on every level, we're going to image her the right way. If it costs a few extra dollars to make a splash in terms of the right imaging, you go ahead and do it. Mariah's basically said that she felt like they took a lot of care with the imaging from the very beginning, and that they really marketed her as a vocalist, you know, a singer-songwriter. And she said that they actually worked on this album for over a year. Mariah Carey was released on June 12th, 1990, and it entered the US Billboard 200 at number 80 and reached the top 20 in its 4th week. Album topped the chart in its 36th week due to the success of Someday, and then also the performance that she would do at the Grammys of Vision of Love as well. It remained in the top 20 for 65 weeks and on the Billboard 200 for 113 weeks. Mariah Carey was certified 9 times platinum by the RIAA in the United States. The album would also go number 1 in Canada as well, and it was certified 7 times platinum there. It reached the top 10 in Australia, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. Worldwide, the album has sold more than 15 million copies. Her self-titled debut album also finished 1991 as a top Billboard 200 album. The album was generally received positively with praise for her vocal performances and the technique there, but it was more critical in terms of the songwriting. Since its release, Mariah Carey has been hailed as a pop and R&B classic, with Billboard describing it as jumpstarting one of the most successful stories in pop music history, commenting on the success of the album in a particularly saturated female pop landscape in 1990. Anderson further states that the record helped Carey carve a place as the foremost musician of her generation. The widespread influence of Carey's vocal delivery on the album, particularly Vision of Love, has also been noted by critics. Complex described the record as the album that launched a million runs, stating that it gave an entire generation of would-be divas something to sing into their hairbrushes. Robert Christgau, the Village Voice, says, unenthusiastically touching on the opera roots of Carey's mother while finding much of the material clueless about his love's themes. She would win 2 Grammys, one for Best New Artist after the Milli Vanilli controversy that happened, and regarding this, she said to the press, with all the controversy surrounding this award, I hope to bring it back to a real singer-songwriter category where everyone else following me can be as proud as I am to receive this honor. She would also receive Best Pop Vocal Performance for Vision of Love as well, and she would get 3 Soul Train awards for this album. And she was heavily compared to Whitney Houston, and in their interviews you can tell that they respected each other and they would eventually become friends and collaborate as well.
All right, what do you think about when people compare Mariah Carey to you? How do you feel about that?
Let me think. I think that Mariah has a great voice. I think she's a good singer. Yes. Absolutely. I think that Mariah is Mariah, and that's what she should be known for her work, and not for being compared or sounding like me. You know, I don't really hear it. You know, there are a few inflections. You know, inflections mean, you know, oh yeah, you know, that's in, you know, that's runs and inflection. So she does a little bit of that. I think she and I probably have the same tones, you know, in some areas, but I don't think that she sounds like me, nor do I sound like her.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
A lot of comparisons between you and Whitney Houston. Does that bother you, that people sort of say, oh, you know, you're very similar? Does that worry you at all?
When you're new, you have to be compared to someone,
Sure.
you know? So, I mean, there are a lot worse people I could be compared to, and she's a superstar and a great vocalist, so...
Because you want to be successful in your own right as well.
As a songwriter and a singer, which is, you know, I've co-written all the songs on my debut album, and hopefully people will respect me for my work and who I am. So.
And there would be controversy with her race. Publications from Los Angeles Daily News to Playboy to the Herald Sun described her as white throughout 1990. And so regarding her race, this is something that she has always been very transparent on. She was saying, my mom is Irish, my dad is Venezuelan and black.
And I gotta ask you this too, because you hear people ask all the time, is she black? Is she white? Is she what, you know?
My mother is Irish and my father is Venezuelan and black.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I'd just like to thank R&B Radio for accepting me and the black community for acknowledging me and accepting me in this way, the Soul Train Committee and my mother and my Lord, and I love you. Thank you.
You ran into some controversy about your heritage, your background, are you black or white, and all of that. When you were going through that, what were your feelings? What were your thoughts? And did you ever address it head on?
It's very, very difficult to even like get into that because I don't think people could understand it unless they like lived in my shoes and really knew how hard it was, because it's very tough to be interracial. It really is, because you never know how people are relating to you, perceiving you, you know what I mean? And I personally never really felt like one way or the other. I always felt like I was very much like an outsider to everything, you know what I mean? Not feeling like one thing or another. And that's why, I don't know, it was just very, very, it made me feel good to be embraced by all different, you know, charts and things like that, because it made me feel like it's okay to be who I am. I don't always have to worry about, you know, well, maybe they're thinking this, or maybe they think, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right,
it's like, why does it have to be about that?
Right.
You know, my father's black in Venezuela, my mother is Irish, you know, I should be able to be a combination of those things and not have to worry about, but what are you? You know what I mean?
Right,
But
right.
which one of those three things are you? It's like, I'm all of them, and that's who I am. To deny one would be to deny myself,
Right.
you know? So I have to be everything that I am. That's it.
So you are comfortable with that now? I mean, you've come to grips with that, and it doesn't bother you like it did before?
I think that people are more bothered by it than I am.
Yeah.
I think other people have a lot harder time dealing with me being multiracial than I do. It's fine for me. I don't think about it. But other people like to be able to pinpoint you and to kind of stereotype you and say, what are you? Where do you fit in to my puzzle so I know how to categorize you? You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't need to categorize myself because I'm me. But other people, you know, don't have the same outlook. And that's understandable. And hopefully one day we'll be able to deal with each other
is it really
as
understandable?
people and not, you know, categories.
I was very upset by certain things that were written in the press, like another white girl trying to sound black and things like that. And when I had a luncheon at one point for like a lot of R&B press, I addressed those issues with those people. And I mean, it got written about a little bit, but you know, when you're dealing within a corporate structure and you're basically a teenage girl that is starting out surrounded by a lot of powerful people, you are not at the helm of how you are perceived. I feel like if I've done anything in my career, forget breaking records, forget anything, if I've done anything, it's help mixed race kids have a role model, because they write me and they talk to me and they tell me thank you, and I didn't have that when I was growing up, so I feel good about that.
She's been helping with her influences as well, such as Aretha Franklin, who she holds in very high regard. Stevie Wonder, she said that he's her favorite artist of all time. Gladys Knight, Shaka Khan, Minnie Riperton, among others as well.
Who was your inspiration?
Well, I was inspired by a lot of great singers. Minnie Riperton, with that register, she used to sing in that register. And when I was little, I used to listen to her records and try to hit those notes, so that's where that came from.
You know, that's exactly why I asked you that question, because I thought it was Minnie.
Yeah, and Aretha Franklin, of course, Gladys Knight, Shaka, all the great singers.
My brother and sister are 9 and 10 years older than me, so they would be playing like Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, Gladys Knight. My mother would be playing Sarah Vaughan or Billie Holiday, so I had those influences as well as the opera influence. So I just sort of gravitated more that way.
And then also something that I wanted to note, as I feel like she has a lot of charisma during this era. You can tell that she's very, very shy in interviews as well, but whenever she like feels comfortable, opens up a little bit. You know, she definitely has humor, she has a personality on on her. And I definitely feel like as she went throughout her career, she definitely stopped being as shy and was able to show more of her personality. So the best performances of this year, in my opinion, Vision of Love at SNL, Love Takes Time in Stockholm, and then I would also say Vanishing on SNL as well. And of course, I really liked We're Not Making Love Anymore. Fan favorites, Vision of Love, Someday, Prisoner, and All on Your Mind. My quick thoughts on this album: this is my favorite debut album of all time. I really feel like she started off so incredibly strong with this thing. Vocals on here are fantastic, especially on a song like All on Your Mind, for example. Just insane what she was able to do vocally there. I love Alone in Love, of course. Vision of Love, in my opinion, is the best debut single of all time, and it's so incredibly influential. I love Love Takes Time. I think Prisoner is a jam. So I really do enjoy it. I feel like it's really strong with the vocals and the riffs and runs and melisma. Like, I feel like she's the best musicality of all time. And then I also really love the production on here, and I really think that she's a great songwriter. Like, the fact that she wrote like Alone in Love at 14 is impressive. Like, the fact that she wrote some of these songs whenever she's in high school, like, that is just something that really takes me back. I feel like she never really gets the credit as a songwriter that she deserves, so I do love this album for sure. Mariah says that she doesn't really care for most of the production on this album, and she basically said that she prefers the demo of the songs just because they were more raw and soulful and real, and that she wasn't allowed to be as involved in the production as she would have liked. And for what she did do, she wasn't necessarily credited for as well, and that her career was whitewashed from the beginning, which we will touch on later. Sony Music Video released the first Vision on VHS in the United States on January 22nd, 1991, and in the UK on March 4th, 1991. And so on this, you would get her music videos, you would get some performances that she's done, and she would also have like some footage in there and also interviews. After having a wildly successful debut album, Mariah would not end up touring it, and so she said in an interview that I watched on Video Soul that she was already writing for her second album, and she said she wanted to have material ready and things like that.
So what's in the future for you? What do you want to do next?
Well, right now I'm just writing new material, you know, and getting ready for my second album and stuff. And
Already?
yeah, I want to have a lot ready for when it comes down to recording and, you know, doing it. So.
But that's a long ways off, isn't it? I mean, you're just on your second single. It's still climbing.
I want to be prepared.
I can tell. So you won't tour off of this album?
I don't think so, no.
Why?
I didn't. Well, I don't know. I just want to I want to have the best show that I can, and probably if I wait till the second album, I'll have more material and stuff, and it'll just be better.
Okay, well, that makes sense. But you know, are you anxious to do that, though? I mean, is it something that you look forward to doing, to getting out and touring?
Yeah, I think it'll be great.
Well, how do you find the patience, then, to say, I'll wait until the next album, which, I mean, that could be 2 years from now?
Because I really want it to be right, and I want to have enough good material for my second album, and I want to put enough time into writing the songs as I put into the first album. So if I went on the road, it'd be like, I don't know when I'd have time to write and stuff. So.
And so I feel like this was more so for creative freedom and kind of just show artistic expression and where she was basically at the point.
It wasn't like I planned to put out a second album so quickly. It just so happened that I was writing while I was putting out singles from my first album. And before the album was even really successful, you know, I had a lot of songs already for my second album. So I decided, instead of waiting like, you know, most people would do, just to put out the music, because I felt that I was growing as an artist, and I wanted to get that out there and show that.
It is a lot more her artistically, and we will talk about that a little bit later. As she was writing the album, she had a falling out with Ben Margulies due to a contract that she signed before she got signed to Columbia, and essentially she had agreed to not only split the songwriting royalties from the songs, but half of her earnings as well. Whenever it was time to write for this album, the Sony officials told him that he was only going to be paid the fair amount given to co-writers on an album, and due to this, he followed a lawsuit against Sony claiming that under contract he would be entitled to work with Carey as well as reap extra benefits. After an almost 1-year lawsuit, the judge settled that Margulies was to earn 10% of Carey's direct earnings from her record sales, not including an income from any other ventures. In an interview with Fred Bronson, Carey said, "I signed blindly. Later, I tried to make it right so we can continue, but he wouldn't accept it." After the settlement, Margulies said that he wanted to work again with Carey and that he placed most of the blame on the record company, concluding, "Hopefully one day art will prevail over business." And so due to their falling out, she would work with a lot of new producers on this record. So she would still work with Walter, who would produce Love Takes Time for her on the first record, right? She would also work with C&C Music Factory as well as Carole King, and they would write If It's Over together on the album. Emotions was the lead single for the album, and it was released on August 13th, 1991. And this is a gospel R&B disco track that shows off her whistle register. The song would stay at #1 for 3 weeks, and the RIAA certified it platinum in 2019. Internationally, it was moderately successful, topping the Canadian singles chart and reaching the top 10 in Greece, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. There was controversy with this song, as some people thought that it sounded too similar to Best of My Love by The Emotions, but generally it was reviewed positively by music critics who complimented her vocal performance. Can't Let Go would be the second single for the album, released on October 23rd, 1991. It would peak at #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 due to the single being pulled in an attempt to boost sales of the album, and it would spend 17 weeks in the top 40. And the song also topped the Hot Adult Contemporary Tracks, and it would reach #3 in Canada and the top 20 in the UK. Make It Happen would be the third and final single, released on April 4th, 1992, and it would peak at #5 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and it performed weekly internationally compared to the previous singles that she had released. The song was #7 in Canada, top 40 in the UK and Australia, and it was positively received by critics who could appreciate the lyrical content and also complimented her vocals as well. And this is a fan favorite, being about her life shortly after she moved to Manhattan and she was broke and trying to make it as a singer and working all these various jobs. And one lyric that stands out is whenever she says, "No proper shoes upon my feet. Sometimes I couldn't even eat." And in her book she says, "The first decision of every day was whether I was going to get a bagel from H&H or buy Subway token. I was surviving on $1 a day and something had to give. If I could walk where I needed to go, breakfast would win." So definitely a more personal song and just one that's really uplifting. I do really like the Madison Square Garden version of the song. If you haven't checked it out, do it. It's incredible. And there was a lawsuit for this song in June 1994 by songwriter Kevin McCord, who accused them of incorporating significant musical elements from his 1979 song I Want to Thank You into Make It Happen. McCord said, "If you listen to the chords at the beginning of the song, the similarity is obvious. It's the exact same chords in a different key." He also noted lyrical similarities. Carey's side initially claimed McCord had no standing to sue, but McCord's attorney showed the song's copyright owners had transferred their legal interest in I Want to Thank You to McCord in an effort to adjudicate their claims. Though a Carey spokesperson maintained the copyright infringement allegations were false, McCord said he had turned down settlement offers from Carey's camp. McCord eventually accepted a settlement offer of about $500,000. In terms of promotion for this album, she wouldn't tour either, and she went on a bunch of different programs to promote it and television shows as well. In the UK, she would go on Top of the Pops, Wogan, and Des O'Connor Tonight. She would also visit Sweden and other countries as well. So she would perform Emotions live at the MTV VMAs. She would go on Arsenio Hall once again, Soul Train. She performed on Saturday Night Live and the Oprah Winfrey Show, and she would also perform If It's Over at the Grammys, where she would be nominated for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance for Emotions. And I still don't know how to this day she hasn't won that. I have to state that, like, that's one of the best vocal performances ever, but that's besides the point. And also she was nominated for Producer of the Year non-classical, and a second woman to do this behind Janet Jackson. And so in terms of the performance of this record, it was released on September 17th, 1991, and it would debut at #4 on the US Billboard 200 with first week sales of 129,000 units. The album spent 27 weeks in the top 20 and a total of 54 weeks on the album's chart. Globally, it failed to live up to the success of the debut, and it also reached top 10 in 8 countries, including Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. The album was successful in Japan, and it would sell 1 million copies over there, and it has been certified 4 times platinum by the RIAA, and it has sold 8 million copies worldwide. And so fan favorites on this album, I would definitely say Emotions, Can't Let Go, Make It Happen, and If It's Over. So overall, this album was a lot more her. Like I said, on her debut, she didn't really get to be as involved in the production as she would have liked, right? And so essentially, with the success of that, she was able to have a lot more say-so on this. She co-produced the entire thing, and then she also said that she felt like it was going to be more stripped back, more sparse, really letting the vocals shine, and also not having it be shadowed by overproduction, essentially. And musically on here, there's a lot more soul, gospel, jazz, disco, 60s, 70s influences, that kind of thing. And so yeah, it's just a lot more in her wheelhouse. Also, she wrote all the lyrics on this album alone, which is insanely impressive.
With this album, I had a lot better of an idea about how I wanted to go about recording it. It's just a lot more me coming across, and I feel that I had the opportunity to let myself go and to be more true to myself as a singer and a songwriter, because I didn't have someone there telling me, well, maybe sing it like this, sing it like that. Everyone that I worked with, it was a true collaboration. Definitely wanted to let my voice shine through as the lead instrument more than covering up what I do with a lot of unnecessary production. We did, you know, some songs have a lot of production on them, but we did whatever the song called for. Some songs are just entirely, you know, much more acoustically rooted. I wrote a song with Carole King on the album, and we did the entire thing with a live band, and we just did, you know, 3 or 4 takes, and that was it. We didn't mess around with computers or things like that.
And this is a great album, probably one of my favorite Mariah albums for sure. Like, I really do love it. But you can definitely feel the growth from the debut, I would say, as a singer, as a songwriter, and the vocals on here are impressive. I love the production, I love the lyrics. It's just a really top tier album in my opinion. Overall, I feel like this is very underrated in her discography, and I really wish that she would have discussed it more. And so a lot of people wonder, why did Emotions underperform? And there's multiple reasons for that, and let's go over them. So first up, the debut was just a better album. I heard the saying like, oh, you work your entire life on your first album, of course, so it can be really hard to follow that up for sure. And I do prefer the debut, but I think Emotions is great, of course. And I feel like a tour behind it definitely would have helped as well. And then also, I feel like the musical styles weren't as popular as the debut, with the more pop and R&B sound on the debut. And this one, like I said, there's a lot more soul, gospel, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like that also ties into it as well. There was also controversies with the samples, like I was just talking about earlier. People felt like it was too soon after the debut, and she was kind of oversaturated in the music industry. You know, maybe take a little break and then come back. So that's really something interesting to think about. Like, I really wonder how this record would have performed if she would have waited until, let's say, 1992.
Did the second album right on the heels of the first album. And I think that was a conscious decision by the record company so that there wouldn't be that sophomore jinx thing. We would go right into it. And that worked. But I remember that was the start of like a really hectic kind of schedule thing. That's when everything started to become like work.
And I definitely think that they could have milked the debut more in terms of the singles. I really would have loved to see All in Your Mind as a single, also Vanishing as well. So I feel like for all these reasons, unfortunately underperformed, but I still think it's a great album, like I already said. And I'd really love to know which ones that you guys prefer down below in the comments. After 2 successful albums, and the fact that she didn't tour them, and also the fact that she just did some television performances and things like that, a lot of critics thought that she could not replicate the vocals live, that she was just a studio singer and all that, so they wanted to see if she could do it. Basically, she would go on MTV Unplugged in order to promote her second album, Emotions, as well as show the critics that she could really live up to the studio vocals live. And so I'll Be There with Trey Lorenz goes to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart for 2 weeks. Globally, it was successful as well, going to #1 in Canada, the Netherlands, and New Zealand, as well as being in the top 5 in Ireland and the UK. If It's Over from Emotions was released as an airplay-only single in a few countries. It was also released on CD and cassette as a commercial single in Australia on November 23rd, 1992. Due to its success, it was released to the public as an EP with an accompanying VHS titled MTV Unplugged +3 on June 2nd, 1992, and it would peak at #3 on the Billboard 200 chart. In total, the album remained in the top 20 for 14 weeks and on the chart for 57 weeks. And it will go on to be certified 4 times platinum by the RIAA as of November 2018. It would be #1 in the Netherlands and New Zealand as well, and it was certified 2 times platinum, and it would peak at top 5 in the United Kingdom and in the top 10 in Australia and Canada as well. And it was something that was reviewed positively from critics and fans alike. She would get 2 Grammy nominations, Best Female Pop Vocal Performance for MTV Unplugged and Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal for I'll Be There. On to her relationship with Tommy Mottola. In her book, she says, soon after we met, Tommy started making romantic overtures. At first, they were a bit awkward and adolescent, like sending me expensive gun tummy bears. But his persistent gestures and constant attention also gave me a sense of safety. Tommy had a brazen confidence I had never seen up close. He impressed me, and I saw him as a truly empowered person, which I found very attractive. Underneath the shine, however, I had some inkling that there was a darker energy that came with him, a price to pay for his protection. But at 19, I was willing to pay it. For me, Tommy was a potent combination of father figure, Svengali business partner, confidant, and companion. There was never really a strong sexual or physical attraction there, but at the time, I needed safety and stability, a sense of home more than I needed a boyfriend. Tommy understood that, and he provided. I gave him my work and my trust. I gave him my conviction and the combination to my moral code. The relationship was intense and all-encompassing. After all, we already worked together, which was how we spent most of our time. When we weren't working, we were dining at high-end steak houses of infamous Italian restaurants or attending industry events together. I was spending less and less time at my Chelsea apartment and began spending most nights with him. When I felt the pressure from Tommy to give up my place, and against my better instincts, I gave in. Little did I know that relinquishment would mark the beginning of a slow and steady march into captivity. Little did I know giving in to Tommy's demands would gradually swallow my privacy and begin to erase my identity. On weekends, we drove to Tommy's farmhouse in Hillsdale, New York, which I affectionately came to call Hillsdale. On the night I got my first publishing advance for $1 million, Tommy drove us up the Taconic Parkway and pulled up before a gorgeous piece of land. He stopped the car and told me to get out. I looked at the sprawling expanse, shivering in the autumn breeze. It really was stunning. Let's build a house here, Tommy proclaimed. I knew what this translated to. This is where we are building our house. I had no idea the scope of what I was getting myself into. Now, this was no Hillsdale. It was impressive and majestic. 50 acres of fertile green land adjacent to a nature preserve in Bedford, New York. It was sandwiched between properties belonging to Ralph Lauren and a very prominent billionaire, an area guaranteed to be secure. But as I would soon discover, the concept of security was about to turn on me. I hadn't ever wanted to leave the city. city, but that's what we were doing. Tommy was 21 years older than me. He could have been my father. He was also the head of my label. There was no wise woman around me to point out the power dynamic in our relationship was nowhere near 50-50. So maybe I should think twice about going in 50-50 with him on an expensive piece of property. To top it off, we were not yet married, but I was young and I was all the way in with Tommy. I was proud of making my own money, though I had no real concept of money. I recently received an enormous royalty check from sales of my debut album, so I thought I was set for life. Building a dream house with Tommy did not seem like a risk. I was selling millions of records by then, but I didn't know that our dream mansion would come with an unfathomable $30 million price tag. And as it turned out, my time in that house with Tommy would end up costing me so much more money. I did love the process of building that grand manor in Bedford. It opened up a new area of passion in me. I had yet to learn that in reality, I just provided design, inspiration, and put up half the money to build my own prison. No matter how prime the real estate, how grandiose the structure, if it's designed to monitor movement and contain the human spirit, it will serve only to diminish and demoralize those held inside. None of the irony of my proximity to the infamous prison, nor that of its peculiar name, was lost on me. Jokingly, I referred to the Bedford estate as Sing Sing. It was fully staffed with armed guards, security, cameras were installed in most rooms, and Tommy was in control. I later found out he had secretly had security follow me around whenever I went to look at houses or run errands. But I was grateful for the small window of ignorance. And now I have my own fully equipped, gorgeous recording studio. I imagined I could have my own sessions when I wanted to and call in the artists I wanted to work with, like Prince did. Sing Sing wasn't Paisley Park, but it was fabulous and it was mine. Well, half mine. There was a studio with sophisticated recording equipment, but there was also very sophisticated security equipment outfitted throughout the entire house, listening devices, motion detecting cameras recording my every move. So she married Tommy in a big wedding on June 5th, 1993. Tommy is 44, Mariah is 23 at this time. Regarding the marriage, she said, "Many reasonable people have questioned why I married Tommy, but none of them questioned the decision more than I did. I knew I would lose more power as a person, and I was already completely suffocating emotionally in a relationship. We were equally yoked to each other through the music and the business. However, the personal power dynamic between us was never equal. He convinced me that everything would be better if we were married, that things would be different, but what I really hoped was that he would be different. That if I gave him this thing he so adamantly wanted, this marriage that I believed he thought would legitimize him, or quote chatter about him having an affair with an artist on the label, it would change him. I was never completely sure why he wanted to get married so badly. I prayed in doing so he would calm down and loosen his vice grip on my life. I hoped maybe he would trust his wife and let her breathe. I was in my early 20s, just a few years removed from the shack, and the concept of a life that included both personal and professional success. I was accustomed to making all my life choices based on survival. Back then, I didn't choose what glamorous outfit to wear each morning. I chose what survival mechanism I needed to arm myself with that day. More than my personal happiness, I needed my career as an artist to survive. Happiness was secondary. Happiness was a fleeting bonus. I married Tommy because I thought it was the only way for me to survive in that relationship. I saw the power he could put behind my music, and he saw the power my music could give him. Our holy matrimony was built on creativity and vulnerability. I respected Tommy as a partner. If only he had known how to give me the respect I was due as a human being.
Also, something that's worth noting is, like she said before, she couldn't really get a minute to herself. Like, she was never really left alone like that. In her book, she talks about like rolling out of bed at night just trying to get like a snack or write a song or whatever, and then there would be an intercom and Tommy would like hit on that and be like, "Oh, what are you doing?" and blah blah blah. Like, so even in her own house, like, she couldn't just like do her own thing without Tommy being like, "Oh, what are you doing exactly?" and all that stuff. Also, she said that she didn't unfortunately get to talk with her friends on the phone like that really, and she would kind of just try to sneak in little moments like that, talking to the friends on the phone or just having alone time, things like that. So with everything else that we have, man, he was really controlling.
Also, something that's really important to note that doesn't really get talked about as often as it should is that she was definitely groomed. Like, the fact that he was over 20 years older than her, like she said, he definitely could have been a father figure to her. So it was definitely a thing where he met her young and like he preyed on her. And so there's already a huge power imbalance there, but then you add that on top of it, and yeah, it was definitely a manipulation. But yeah, very predatory, very controlling overall in the marriage. So believe me, we will touch more on her relationship to Tommy later and how that affected her career, but I figured that I would discuss it now because I feel like it's very important to know this information going into the next album, and I will kind of tie that together later. Basically, after Emotions flop, Columbia kind of wanted her to do a more so commercial and radio-friendly album, something that was going to be more adult contemporary, and their plans were to kind of like tone down her vocal on here, have a softer production. So she agreed to do this and started working with Walter on her third album, which was going to be Music Box, and she worked with other producers as well, such as Babyface, Robert Clavillis, and David Cole of CNC Music Factory once again, and you would also have Daryl Simmons on this record. Dream Lover was the lead single of the album, released on July 27th, 1993, and this was produced by Dave Hall and also additional production by Walter Afanasieff. And the song song incorporates a sample of the hook from Blind Alley by The Emotions, previously used in Ain't No Half Steppin' by Big Daddy Kane, into its melody and instrumentation. And this was her incorporating more hip-hop into her music essentially, as she was working with Dave Hall, who had worked with Mary J. Blige on Whistle 411. The single would debut at number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and due to its massive airplay, it would reach number 1 and it would stay there for 8 weeks. It also reached number 1 in Canada and top 10 in many other countries, and it was certified platinum by the RIAA as well. So Mariah said Dream Lover was whitewashed. She said she wanted a rapper on there, but the label wasn't ready for that.
Dream Lover, which is it was slightly whitewashed, you know, rather than, you know, when we put the organ solo and all that. It's nostalgic, but I know that that's there because I wanted a rapper to be on that part, but nobody was ready for that. Yeah.
And also Walter said he was basically brought to improve upon it and basically make it more commercial. I personally love the Dream Lover that we got. Some people say the Band Jam sample version is what she intended. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I wanted to throw that out there. In terms of reception of the song, Dream Lover earned widely positive reviews from music critics, many of whom praised its production, the sampling of the hook, and the vocal. Here would be the second single on the album, and it was released on October 18th, 1993. And this song was originally intended for Gloria Estefan for a movie of the same name essentially, and basically she played it for Tommy Mottola after they finished it up, and he was like, no, you have to keep this, and so she did. And so she said that's why it's so easy for her to sing, because normally she writes her song in a higher key, but because she wrote it lower, you know, it's easy to sing. Basically she said that it's grown on her because of, you know, how it connects with people and how it's helped people through a tough time. And the song would end up being her 8th number 1 single, staying at the top for 4 weeks, and it also reached the top 5 in Canada, France, Ireland, New Zealand, and Norway, and it would go top 10 in Australia and the UK as well. And here was the subject of 2 copyright plagiarism cases, which were ultimately thrown out. Additionally, it was nominated for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance at the 37th Annual Grammy Awards. The song received acclaim from music critics, calling it her most directly inspirational song since Make It Happen. Without You would be the 3rd single for this album, and it would be released on January 24th, 1994 in the United States. It was promoted as a double A-side with Never Forget You, and Without You would end up reaching number 3 on the US Billboard Hot 100 chart for 6 weeks, and it was certified platinum by the RIAA and sold 600,000 copies domestically, and it was also very successful throughout Europe as well, and it became her first number 1 single in Austria, Germany, Ireland, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. She had the song renewed popularity. In Canada, it would peak at number 4, and also she would receive a chart double in the UK, with both Without You and the album Music Box holding the top spot at the same time. At the time of the singles release in the US, Without You and Never Forget You, Billboard's magazine rules allow double-sided singles to chart together as one entry on the singles charts. A song that picked up the most airplay and or sales for the respective chart was listed as the A-side. It was received well, with Billboard describing Never Forget You as a softly rhythmic pop R&B slow jam equipped with a deliciously catchy chorus and wonderful booming instrumentation. He added, Carey's vocal is sweetly sincere as she ponders a love affair that has come to an end. Another sparkling moment from the diva's current music box opus, Anytime You Need a Friend, was released on May 24th, 1994 as the 5th and final single from the album, and it was something that was different from the rest of the album as it was a gospel song. Anytime You Need a Friend would peak at number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and this would become her first single not to reach top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. And it was popular on the US radio and was ranked number 47 on the 1994 year-end charts, and would peak at number 5 in Canada and top the singles charts in Finland. The song attained a top 20 peak position in Australia, France, Ireland, New Zealand, Switzerland, and the UK. Music Box was released on August 31st, 1993, and it entered the US Billboard 200 at number 2 with 174,000 copies sold, and it would become her 4th consecutive top 10 album in the country. In its 15th week after release, the album reached number 1 on the chart, staying there for 8 non-consecutive weeks. It remained in the top 10 for 31 weeks, and on the Billboard 200 for 128 weeks, re-entering the chart 3 times. The album also reached number 1 on the top R&B hip-hop albums. Music Box was the 2nd best-selling album in the United States in 1994, only behind Ace of Base's The Sign. In the US, Music Box became her best-selling album at the time, being certified diamond by the RIAA. It would peak at number 2 in Canada, and it was certified 7 times platinum there, and it was also her best-selling album in Europe as well, going number 1 in Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Portugal, Scotland, Switzerland, and the UK. Music Box has sold over 28 million copies worldwide and is one of the best-selling albums of all time. Music Box got mixed reviews from critics. On Rolling Stone, they said the lyrics were made up entirely of pop and so cliches on an album so precisely calculated to be a blockbuster that its impact is ultimately a little unnerving. Time called it perfunctory and almost passionless, in spite of highlights in Anytime You Need a Friend and the title track. The LA Times wrote that Carey's pop soul songs still lacked emotion, even though she had turned on her vocal showboating. They accused Music Box of being geared toward an adult contemporary audience that likes its soul whitewashed and in small doses. Overall, it's an important album because it helped her cross over internationally and gained more success, and it is her best-selling album. In terms of my opinion, I do think that it is whitewashed. She said that she was whitewashed from the beginning, and I feel like this is the peak of Columbia whitewashing her music. We know that Dream Lover was whitewashed, as I was discussing, and this album is more ballad heavy and adult contemporary in comparison to the first two. I feel like it doesn't have the same personality as them as well, and she's also belting more on this one, and it doesn't have quite the same vocal gymnastics as the first two do. Of course, she still sounds great, but that's definitely something that I wanted to know. And I feel like this album is just drawing to listen to, especially next to Emotions, for example, which had the soul and R&B and gospel elements all over it. Generally, I think they pushed really hard to make the album mass appeal and adult contemporary and for a wide audience, and that's honestly how I feel about it, because like I said, they wanted her to cross over, they wanted her to have more success. In her book, she says, apart from the ambition, Tommy and I were completely different, and the black part of myself caused some confusion. From the moment Tommy signed me, he tried to wash the urban translation black off of me. And it was no different when it came to the music. The songs on my very first demo, which would become my first smash album, were much more soulful, raw, and modern in their original state. Just as he did with my appearance, Tommy smoothed out the songs for Sony, trying to make them seem more general, more universal, more ambiguous. I always felt like he wanted to convert me into what he understood. A mainstream, meaning white artist. Yes, I know that she wrote all the songs on this album, obviously, but she said, for example, like we were talking about with The Love Takes Time, that sometimes they would ask her to write a ballad or a certain song, and then she would end up doing it. And of course, there's exceptions like Anytime You Need a Friend, which is a gospel record. You have a song like Now That I Know, I've Been Thinking About You. So I'm not saying she had no vision on this record at all. Like I said, I know that she wrote all the songs on this, but I'm saying I feel like if she could have done what she actually wanted to do, I feel like the album would have turned out differently. And I know that some people are going to disagree with me and say that it wasn't whitewashed. It just is what it is. Also, I want to say, just because I think that it's whitewashed doesn't mean that I don't think that it's a good album. And some people definitely say that just to write off the album and because they don't like it and think that it's boring and whatever. But I definitely think that this is a complex conversation to have. It's something that's intricate and very interesting overall. And two things can be true at once. I do think it was whitewashed, but I still think that it's a good album at the end of the day. Two additional tracks from the album were released, with Do You Think of Me being the B-side to Dream Lover, and Everything Fades Away was featured on international versions of the album. And I definitely think the Rarities track should have been on here. Do You Think of Me, Everything Fades Away, All I Live For. I feel like it would have made it more dynamic. Take out the 3 weakest tracks on the album and put those on, it would have improved it so much more. And I feel like these really show where she was going on Daydream with the songwriting and everything. All incredible tracks. Do You Think of Me is one of my favorite Mariah songs of all time. My favorites on this, I would say Dream Lover, Anytime You Need a Friend, Hero, and Without You as well. And also, going back to the point about the album being whitewashed, I feel like they did it with the marketing as well. It definitely marketed her as white and racially ambiguous, something that is like racial insensitive. And just weird overall, so I wanted to note that, of course.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify that just because I'm saying this doesn't mean that I think like Mariah willingly went along with it or anything like that. Like she said, at the time she didn't really have control over how she was perceived, and people were in charge of her imaging, of her music, and all those things, and she was heavily controlled during that time, obviously. And like I was saying earlier, whenever she debuted, there was a lot of people thought she was white, and she went to make sure that she was clarifying that. Whenever she was asked about her racial background, she said, my dad is black and Venezuelan and my mom is white. She was clear about that from the very beginning. She said that she's proud to be a black woman, and there is that. And so I definitely think because, you know, some people thought that she was white or racially ambiguous or whatever, the label kind of picked up on that and was like, oh, if they think that, then she'll definitely sell more records. And so I think that they made a conscious decision in terms of the marketing with that to try to get people to, you know, think that she was white or racially ambiguous, when in actuality, you know, she is half black as well. And so I think that that's a really important thing to say. And overall, I think that this was really disgusting of the label to do. Like, I think that they did it because, you know, they wanted her to sell more records or whatever. But I think that it's really messed up to try to erase someone's racial identity or to try to have people perceive them as a race that they're just not. So this is something that just really irritates me. But as I go on, I kind of explain how I think that they went to do about it, but I just really wanted to clarify on that point.
And this is something that is so obvious when you look at the promo for it. And she definitely had a wholesome image at this time, giving very girl next door. And she said that Tommy made her wear longer garments and cover up, though sometimes she could basically get away with wearing more revealing clothes. And then she also talks about being set to perform Fantasy at the AMAs, and then basically she was wearing like this long trench coat and everything. Ironically, my outfit for this performance was giving you pseudo militant Mariah vibes, with black leather pants, a black leather trench coat, and a black turtleneck. I'm sure Tommy liked it because the only skin exposed was my face. Maybe it was a premonition of what was ahead. She says, my image was supposed to be non-image. That's why I was in a field wearing a flannel shirt with cutoffs and sneakers. Girls could relate to that. But ever since I've been 12 years old, it was just in me to want to be someone who could change their look and look more glamorous. Also, something worth noting, her curls are looser. And in the book, she said something interesting. She says, for instance, Tommy never wanted me to wear my hair straight. I think to him, it didn't look naturally straight. It looked strange. He thought it made me look too urban, translation black, or R&B like Faith Evans. Instead, he insisted that I always wear my loose and bouncy curls, which I think he thought made me look almost like an Italian girl. Though ironically, my curls are a direct result of my black DNA, assisted by a good small barrel curling wand to integrate the frizz. So I would definitely like to know if you guys think that this album is whitewashed. Do you think that it shows in the music? Do you think that it shows in the marketing? Do you think that it's both? Because I asked on social media and people said various things. Most people people agreed with me that it was whitewashed, but I definitely got some interesting responses, so please let me know down below in the comments because it's a really interesting conversation to me. So I was listening to this Questlove interview and she said something really interesting, and so I wanted to read it to you guys. Our process was very unique and very imperfect for a specific time, like the music books era. That was when I feel, you know, we did some of our best work together. So as I continue to try to infuse more of what I really loved, it's not that I didn't love the music books album. And so hearing this was shocking to me because I guess maybe she likes the album more than I would think. Maybe it's growing on her. Maybe she didn't care for it because of what she was going through with Tommy, but maybe she likes it now. Maybe she likes a few records off of it. I don't know. It's something that's really interesting to me and just something that like really caught me off guard. So I know that the 30th anniversary of this album is coming up, so maybe she will talk about how she feels about the album. I would love to know if it was whitewashed, you know, in her personal opinion, of course. I feel like it was though, in comparison to the first two records with her saying that they always wanted to push her more adult contemporary and all that. I feel like it's pretty obvious that this album was whitewashed. Like listening to it, like it's pretty obvious to me at least. If more information comes out about this, I'll definitely leave it down below in a pinned comment or in the description. I'm open to being wrong about this situation, but I definitely feel with the information that we have and what Mariah said, it really lines up. And so in terms of promotion for this album, she would give a performance at Proctor's Theater on July 18th, 1993, which was filmed and later released under the 1-hour special Here Is Mariah Carey, slated for release during the Christmas season. And she would end up touring this album as well. In regards to the tour, she essentially said that she really wasn't prepared for it because whenever a lot of people are getting famous, they're coming up in clubs performing and learning how to do it that way. But she didn't do that because she got signed so young and everything, and so she had to learn on like these big TV programs and all that stuff. And so she basically just like wasn't ready for a tour on that scale at that time, something around there. And then there's also people who say that she was sick for part of it. And where did this come from? Because I've asked multiple lambs about it and they're like, yeah, I have no clue where that came from. Like maybe she said that in an interview somewhere. If you guys have a clip of that or wherever, just like leave it down below in the comments or like let me know where she said that, if she actually did, or maybe someone just made that up. But every time I ask people about it, they're like, yeah, I don't know where it came from, so I would love to know more about that. But that could potentially be a possibility there. And then she also said that she was really nervous for it as well. And so basically she got slammed in the reviews at the beginning. She let her inhibitions go, and then she ended up getting better reviews that she thought were more representative of the tour. I will say from the tour footage that I have seen, she sounded absolutely incredible, especially on a record like All in Your Mind. And so that is something worth noting there. But if anybody has any more information on the tour, then definitely let me know down below in the comments. Also in regards to sales for the story, it did do pretty well. Something that's really interesting to me overall is that I was listening to this interview that she did, and she said that she wasn't a touring artist and that the label didn't want her to tour, and they were like, why not? And she said it's more profitable for her to release albums every year and not tour them. So that was really, really fascinating to me, of course, because I've heard various things on why she didn't tour and stuff. So that was really just something that I wanted to add in terms of that as well. And then she would also perform on various television programs such as Top of the Pops, Arsenio Hall, Jay Leno. She would also visit countries such as France, Germany, Japan, the Netherlands, Spain, and Sweden. Also something that was really interesting for me to read in the book was whenever she said she was filming the special and then she saw the police blocking out the street and she asked them like, why are you doing that? And they basically said, oh, it's for your concert. And this was something that surprised her for sure. And she basically said that she had no idea how popular that she was at the time. And you're thinking like, that doesn't really make sense. You had all these #1 singles, you won the Grammys, you know, you did all these things. But she basically said that she was never left alone and everything. And also the label was really controlling her in terms of, you know, her imaging, in terms of her music, in terms of all that. So it definitely makes sense that they would try to do everything that they could so she wouldn't know the scope of her popularity for sure. And she was like, I didn't really know how my music was impacting people and all that kind of stuff. So basically that's whenever she realized how famous she was. And she basically said she believed that Tommy did this on purpose because she would be easier to control if she didn't understand how popular that she was at the time. This was just something that was really fascinating to me and just really shows how controlled that she was during her time with Sony. Endless Love, a duet with Luther Vandross, would be released on August 29th, 1994 on the US Billboard Hot 100 charts, debuted on September 10th, 1994. At number 31, it peaked at number 2. Followed back from number 1 by Boyz II Men, I'll Make Love to You. It was successful outside the US, reaching number 1 in New Zealand for 5 weeks and the top 5 in the UK, Australia, Ireland, and the Netherlands. And it also reached the top 10 in most countries. It was certified platinum in Australia and in New Zealand, and total sales in the UK are around 230,000. She would also get a Grammy nomination for Best Pop Vocal Collaboration for this as well. So Tommy Mottola convinces Mariah to do a Christmas album. Mariah was kind of hesitant to do so as you didn't really do this until you're a more established artist, but eventually she ended up doing it. And so for this album, she would write 3 original Christmas songs, which are going to be All I Want for Christmas Is You, Miss You Most at Christmas Time, and Jesus Born on This Day. All I Want for Christmas Is You was released as a lead single from the album on October 29th, 1994, and it's an up-tempo pop and R&B track with some gospel influences. And she basically said it was very 60s, giving very much Ronette vibes, girl group vibes. song couldn't chart on the Billboard Hot 100 chart during its original release due to the fact that it was not released commercially as a single in any physical format. In the first week of January 1995, All I Want for Christmas Is You peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 Adult Contemporary chart and at number 12 on the Hot 100 Airplay charts. And it would go back on those charts in December 95 and also 96, roll-ups in 98, and then the song would chart on the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 83 in January 2000. The song topped the Billboard Hot Digital Songs chart in December 2005, but it couldn't attain a new peak on the Billboard Hot 100 because it was considered a recurrent single, and so it wasn't eligible for chart entry. And then every December from 2005 to 2008, the song topped the Billboard Hot 100 recurrence chart. In 2012, after the recurrent rule was edited to allow all songs in the top 50 onto the Billboard Hot 100 charts, the single re-entered the chart at number 29 and peaked at number 21. In December 2017, the song reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100, giving Carey her 28th top 10 song in the country and her first since Obsessed in 2009. In 2019, it would go number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart for the first time, 25 years after it was released, breaking a lot of records, including the longest trip to number 1. And then the following year, it would top the charts in the UK for the first time. The song was successful globally, topping the charts in 26 countries, including Australia, Canada, France, and Germany. And All I Want for Christmas Is You is the best-selling holiday song by a female artist, and one of the best-selling physical singles in music history, selling over 16 million copies worldwide. And the song is also certified 12 times platinum by the RIAA in the United States, becoming the first and only holiday song to accomplish this feat. It's also our best-selling single in the UK, where it was certified 6 times platinum there, becoming the highest certified song of all time by a female artist in the country. And December 2021, the song reached 1 billion streams on Spotify, making it the first holiday song to achieve this. And Mariah would become the first artist in history to top the chart in 4 separate decades: 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, and on the 2020 chart. All I Want for Christmas Is You has charted every holiday since its original release, and due to the impact of the song, she was dubbed the Queen of Christmas. I have to say really quickly, this is the best Christmas song of all time. Could it be a basic pick? Maybe, but it's like, have you listened to the song? Like, it is incredible vocally with everything that she is doing on there. I love the background vocals, how it gets filled out. I really quite love the production on there as well, and I really love the lyrics that she wrote over it. And she basically said for this song and this album, she really wanted to make it timeless and something you can enjoy for years to come, and that's why she didn't really mention any trends at the moment. It really transfers through. Like, this is an incredible record. Always loved it whenever I was younger. I still love it to this day. If you hate the song, get some taste. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, what she did with this record, that's history.
Okay, so I forgot to talk about how the song was received by critics, so here's a little screenshot of there, and I'll just read a couple notable ones. So Music Week wrote, Mariah meets Phil Spector, some chines, and the inevitable sleigh bells. This is everything you would expect from a Mariah Carey record. In a 2006 retrospective look at Carey's career, Joshua Jones of The New Yorker said, the charming song was one of Carey's biggest accomplishments, calling it one of the few worthy modern additions to the holiday canon. And so yeah, it was generally well praised by critics in terms of the vocals, the instrumentation, the production, and all that, and it's usually hailed as a classic and very well received in terms of that, but I had to add that in because it's a very big song for her. Also, something that's important to note with the success of this record in particular, now everybody wants to have a Christmas song and a Christmas album, and this is definitely something that Mariah popularized because, like I said, you normally didn't do a Christmas record until you were a more established artist and everything. And so with people seeing how successful that song is every year and the cultural staple that it is, a lot of people are trying to recreate the success of this song with something that they're doing. And I feel like it's not landing because they're not great songwriters. You can tell that it's not from a genuine place in their heart, and so these records just don't really land. A lot of people don't even know that Mariah wrote this record because they think that it's a cover, and I feel like it definitely has that classic sound to it, and she just really knocked it out of the park in terms of that, and everything else on the song I feel is really top notch. But yeah, she definitely popularized that. A lot of people are trying to have, you know, big smash Christmas songs and stuff like that, and I feel like a lot of them are just not going to stand the test of time because I don't think that they're good records. So that's really a testament to her talent as a singer, a writer, and producer.
Her cover version of Darlene Love's Christmas Baby Please Come Home reached the top 20 on the US Holiday 100 charts and the top 40 in Latvia, Lithuania, Slovakia, and the Netherlands, and was certified gold in the United States. Her cover version of Santa Claus Is Coming to Town peaked at number 26 in Hungary, at number 45 on the US Holiday 100, and also number 142 in South Korea. Her version of Silent Night also charted at number 98 in the Netherlands. Hark the Herald Angels Sing and Gloria in Excelsis Deo also charted on the US Holiday 100, number 54. Billboard described Columbia's level of promotion as unprecedented for a Christmas album. On November 14th, 1994, the label released 3 songs to US radio stations as promotional singles. All I Want for Christmas Is You, top 40 and adult contemporary radio stations. Jesus Born on This Day on Christian and gospel stations. And Miss You Most at Christmas Time on the R&B stations. The latter was also commercially released that year, including in the Philippines where it served as a lead single in that country. Originally released in 1994 as a 12-inch promotional single of remixes, Joy to the World was released in Australia as the album's 3rd single on November 27th, 1995. Becoming a top 40 hit there, A Holy Night was released as a promotional single in 1996 and later peaked at number 31 in Italy, at number 70 on the US Holiday 100 charts, and at number 191 in France, later being certified gold in the United States and in Single-Handedly. Also, something worth noting is her arrangement of Oh Holy Night is very popular, and also this is the best version of it in my personal opinion. And so Merry Christmas would be released on October 28th, 1994, and it would debut at number 30 on the US Billboard 200 with 45,000 copies sold in its first week. And its fifth week, the album peaked at number 3 on the charts with sales of 208,000 copies, but experienced its highest sales in its sixth week with another 500,000 copies sold. The album was the second best-selling holiday album that year with a total of 1,859,000 copies sold. In 2020, Merry Christmas was certified 8 times platinum by the RIAA. Internationally, it would go number 1 in Japan, becoming her first number 1 album there. The album experienced its highest sales with 2.8 million copies and became the 4th best-selling album by a non-Asian solo artist, and also it would go number 1 in Latvia and Lithuania as well. It achieved top 10 in 16 additional countries, including Australia, Canada, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland, and Merry Christmas has sold 15 million copies worldwide and stands as one of the best-selling holiday albums in world history, and it was also the best-selling Christmas album by a woman as well. In terms of the reception on this album, it was mixed. Some critics really liked the gospel vocals, some didn't really care for it. In Los Angeles Times, it says, Carey attempts her share of girl group pop amid the quasi-gospel melisma, though still not evidencing as much personality as talent in either style. The New York Times said, regardless of backup, Miss Carey oversings glutting songs with her vocal takes like sliding down from the note above the melody notes and turning expressions of devotion into narcissistic displays. The Chicago Tribune called Carey a trilling songbird and over-the-top irritant throughout the album, particularly on All I Want for Christmas Is You, where she sounds like a Bush League Petulia Clark. The newspaper later named it the 7th worst Christmas album ever. In terms of promotion, she would perform a concert at the Cathedral of St. John on December 8th, 1994. So in terms of my thoughts on this album, I definitely think that this is one of her best albums, my favorite Christmas album of all time. And so I really feel like the arrangements have her stand apart on a song like Joy to the World. And I like the live version of that a lot more, so that's what I go to. And also on Oh Holy Night, which is incredible vocally. I love All I Want for Christmas Is You. Surprised they let her do this with the more gospel influenced vocals as well, for sure. I love the instrumentation. I just think it's aged well. It's everything that you can want in a Christmas album, essentially. In terms of the fan favorites on this album, they're going to be All I Want for Christmas Is You, Miss You Most at Christmas Time, and Oh Holy Night. And now we're on to the Daydream album. Talking a little bit about the artistic direction in her book, Mariah says, while Tommy would never relinquish control over my life, at a certain point he did begin to make concessions when it came to the production of the music. Always respected me as a songwriter. He was a music man and knew good lyrics and melody structure. However, not only was I outgrowing some of the producers he had attached to me, so was the music industry. I always resisted their push to make me fit in a neat, mainstream adult contemporary category. Adult contemporary was what he knew. It was what his guys knew. And I really knew it too. I could write big pop hits like Hero. I could write Broadway style tunes. Whatever the occasion required, I could make it happen. But I wanted to make more of my own music with a more modern sound. They kept trying to smooth me out while I just wanted to get a little more rough. I wanted to add dynamics and broaden my reach. And of course, there was a racial and cultural dimension that came with integrating hip hop. It was a black art form. Unlike jazz, which Tommy appreciated, or gospel, hip hop was radical, raw, and in your face. It was not designed to make middle-aged white men feel cool. Hip hop really didn't need his kind of hit maker anymore. And I think it threatened him by endangering his power. And yet he couldn't deny the evidence. My instincts were making hits. So he stopped fighting me so much on samples, artists, and producers I wanted to work with. And then she also tells this story, I believe it happened during the Music Box era. Basically, their former manager was with her, and then they basically asked like, oh, what do you think of Puffy, aka P. Diddy, really? And so she basically said like, oh, I think he's the future of music. And then this was something that obviously kind of like took Tommy aback, because like she said, he didn't really like rap music like that at all. Like the label really didn't, and so it was something that they were kind of against basically. And she basically said, Tommy said that Puffy would be shining his shoes in 2 years. And she basically said she stood up to him and told him what he said was racist, and you know, it was kind of something that just like took him aback and everything, because you know, she didn't really stand up for herself that often, but she was really angry about it. So on this album, she would collaborate again with Walter Afanassia, Jermaine Dupri. We also have Babyface, and she would also collaborate with Boyz II Men as well. And so yeah, I feel like this album was more so her getting back into her R&B roots that she started off with.
I'll call him Walter A because I can never pronounce his name properly.
Afanassia, if it's okay.
Right. I mean, he has not, I mean, he's produced so many amazing people. What does he mean to you?
For me, I mean, I learn a lot from Walter because he's a very, very talented and educated musician. But I think that we stretched a little bit on this album as far as stylistically what you would expect the Walter A. Mariah sound to be. Like on songs like Underneath the Stars, a lot of people ask me, who did you do that with? And because it doesn't really sound like some of our previous things. It was like, you know, let's try this, let's experiment with sounds, let's use, you know, a scratch track, let's use an old road sound, you know, so it was like doing things to kind of create a vibe as opposed to here's the typical thing that we do. But I learn a lot from him, and I also, as a songwriter, when when I want to go somewhere, because I'm limited as far as my playing ability goes, and the melody ideas come to me so quickly, he's so talented that I'll go no, yes, until he gets to the exact chord that I'm hearing, and he knows how to get there for me.
Fantasy would be the lead single for the album and was actually released on August 23rd, 1995, and this became the first single by a female artist to debut at #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 chart, and the second one to debut at #1 overall behind Michael Jackson, and it would stay at #1 for 8 weeks, and it would become the second best-selling single of 1995 in the country, and it spent 23 weeks in the top 40, and it was successful on other charts such as the R&B and dance charts as well, and it would be ranked 7th on the Hot 100 year-end charts for 1995 and 49th on 1996, and it ranked at #15 on the Hot 100 decade end chart for the 90s, and this was something that was really successful globally. It would also go #1 in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and it would reach the top 10 in 13 different countries as well. I believe the way that she said that she came up with Fantasy is basically like she was writing a song or something like that. She heard Genius Lola at Time Time Club, she decided to put them together. She would do a remix of the song featuring Old Dirty Bastard, and so P. Diddy would actually produce this.
Me and Mariah go back like babies with pacifiers. Keep the fantasy hot like fire.
And so this was something that she kind of had to like sneak by the label basically, because she was like, if they would have saw his album cover, they would not have let this happen at all. This is basically something that she like really had to fight for it to happen essentially, but like she said, they kind of knew that rap was something that was popular. They couldn't really deny it as well, and so she was really satisfied with it, and so she remembers it playing over the phone and loving it, and then she looked over at Tom and he was like, oh, what is that? I can do that, like get out of here with that, basically about the record. So they weren't really that big of a fan of it, but this is something that was received well by critics, and it would also popularize the pop and rap collab that we see so often today. Definitely something that was essential and important to music, and this is why she's dubbed the architect of modern pop by Rolling Stone. This remix was a huge deal, a big cultural moment, and so Fantasy was praised by critics. One person says Fantasy exemplified how a music sample can be transformed into a fully realized pop masterpiece. Christopher Jones, editor of The New Yorker, commented in referencing to the song's remix. It became standard for R&B hip-hop stars like Missy Elliott and Beyonce to combine melodies with rap verses. Young white pop stars including Britney Spears, NSYNC, and Christina Aguilera have spent much of the past 10 years making pop music that is unmistakably R&B. And something that's worth noting is that this music video will be her directorial debut, and so essentially she did this because in the past she wasn't really completely satisfied with her videos, and so she was like, you know, let me take it upon myself to actually direct this thing. And so I think that it turned out amazingly, and I'm just floored that this was her first time out directing something. Like, it just is something that is so incredibly impressive to me. I really love the night shots, I love the roller coaster. Like, I feel like it perfectly matches the vibe of the song. And then just every once in a while, like, I take a step back and think like, wow, like this was really her first time out directing something. So I definitely have to give Mariah, the director, her 10s for this video, of course. And I just feel like she doesn't get enough credit for how brilliant that she is overall, and she just really ate this music video up. It was interesting in other interviews I watched after the fact, because she basically said like, oh, I wouldn't have kept the night shots in there and all that kind of stuff, but I disagree. It's one of my favorite music videos of all time, and I definitely hold it in high regard. And then as for some quick thoughts on the song, I do think that this is one of the best examples of taking a sample and flipping it on its head, and just what she did with it was absolutely brilliant and it will never be topped. And then I also appreciate how she interpolated, you know, Genius of Love Tom Tom Club at the end, you know, the I'm in Heaven part as well. I just think that this is a flawless pop song. I think that it's a classic, and it's just something that's aged very well over time. One Sweet Day with Boyz II Men will be released as a second single on the album on November 14th, 1995, and essentially she wrote this song about her collaborator David Cole, who unfortunately passed away, and she stopped herself because she was like, I really want Boyz II Men to be on this. She brought it to them, and basically they started writing a similar song about their tour manager who had passed away. So basically they combined like the best of those two songs together, and so One Sweet Day would debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, and it would stay there for 16 weeks, and it was the longest running #1 single in America for 23 years until Lil Nas X with Old Town Road, and it also made Carey the first artist to have more than one #1 debut as well, and it was the third best-selling single of 1995 in the US with sales of over 1,300,000 copies, and it would spend 26 weeks in the top 40 and was certified double platinum by the RIAA. One Sweet Day was named Song of the Decade by Billboard in the original issue. However, they later changed the formula for how they calculated it, so now it's a different song, and now One Sweet Day would be ranked at #9. One Sweet Day was met with universal acclaim from contemporary music critics. AllMusic Stephen Thomas Erlin praised the song for its craft and writing, commenting that in One Sweet Day, a duet with Boyz II Men, Carey appeals to both audiences equally because of the sheer amount of craft and hard work she puts into her album. Stephen Balton from Cashbox wrote, this single could be thrown at the bottom of the 99 Cent Bin, buried under the Partridge Family and Starlight vocal band, and it would still find its way into the hands of fans. This is as big a guaranteed hit as anything that's come out in some time. That you will never find a surer bet than whether the song will make #1. James Mastodon for Dot Music deemed it as a saccharine piece of American soul slush. Open Arms would be released as the 3rd single on December 5th, 1995 in select European countries, and the song achieved success in the UK, Ireland, and New Zealand, where it would peak at #4, 7, and 8. Open Arms charted weekly in other European countries such as Belgium, France, and Germany, where it charted outside the top 30. It also went top 10 in Ireland, Poland, and New Zealand, and the top 20 in Iceland and the Netherlands.
Something worth noting about the song is that it is a Journey cover. I really like what she did with it for the record, how she kind of made it her own, and live performances are great. And so this didn't really receive a warm reception from critics. Bill Lamb called it simply an uninspired song selection. Stephen Thomas Erlewine also criticized the cover, calling it second rate. Open Arms received a negative review from Stephen Holden as well, who called it a sobbing remake. Rolling Stone called it an ill-advised cover.
Always Be My Baby would be released on March 9th, 1996 as the 3rd single in the US and the 4th single worldwide. And this is the first song that she would work on with Jermaine Dupri. And this song would debut at #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and it eventually reached #1 and would stay there for 2 weeks. And it peaked within the top 5 in Canada, New Zealand, and the UK, and it charted outside the top 10 elsewhere. And Mariah also directed the music video for this song, which is incredible, and she just really ate with that once again. She would also direct the music video for the remix as well. I think that this is a classic R&B song that has really stood the test of time. Always Be My Baby received acclaim from music critics. Larry Flick from Billboard described it as a delightfully bright and funky finger snapper. He added that the pop princess reminds us that she has loose-wristed soul to go with those deliciously soaring and dramatic high notes amid a sweet arrangement of easy acoustic guitars, rolling piano lines, and chipper Jeep beats. Music Week stated that it's a concise, fairly subdued, and very catchy tune, and fine showcase from Carey, who resists the temptation to indulge too heavily in vocal gymnastics. In terms of the Always Be My Baby remix, it would be produced by Jermaine Dupri. She went and she re-sang the vocals, and then she also used a sample of Tell Me If You Still Care by the SOS Band, and it also included Debrat and Escape on the track as well. And regarding the remix, there is quite the story behind it. So basically in her book, she says that they came over to her house to record the remix, right? And then she was talking with Debrat, and she was like, oh, do you want to go get some french fries? And so basically they snuck out, because like we were talking about earlier, essentially Tommy didn't really like Mariah to leave the house. Like, she was always staying home all the time. And so I did actually watch this like one interview where she said she was like allowed to go to gay clubs or whatever, but she really didn't get to leave the house that often unless it was like work related or something. And so basically, yeah, they sneak out, they go get fries at Burger King, and they're just kind of living it up, right? And then the security found out that they snuck out, and it was an entire thing. And you know, Jermaine's calling Mariah and all that stuff, like asking where are you, because they're grilling him and they think that he knows where they're at, but he has no clue. And then Debrat basically told her like, hey, you're rich, you're famous, and you have all these things, but if you can't go and get some fries for Burger King, like, you really don't have anything essentially. And so that was something that Mariah kind of took and stayed with her. Eventually they get back to the house. It is an entire ordeal, right, just with that. And then even with all that, they still ended up getting the remix done and the video as well. And then so she also said, you would never know from the video I directed that we were surrounded by armed security. I was a master at editing out the pressure. And so that's a really fascinating story, and I feel like that really applies later. And Slipping Away would be the B-side to this record, and I really do love this song, and I really wish she would do a re-release of the album, like a box set, and throw the rarest tracks on there, because I really think it deserves that treatment. And jointly, the singles from Daydream spent a combined 6 months at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 chart, which is really impressive. Forever would be the 5th single from Daydream, and it was released on June 18th, 1996, and it would only serve as an airplane-only song in the United States and a limited release around the world. It did well in the charts. In the US, the Billboard rules didn't allow the charting of non-commercially released singles, and due to that, it did not chart on the Hot 100. It did peak at #2 on the Adult Contemporary chart. The song would peak at #11 in Canada, 40 in New Zealand, and 44 in the Netherlands. An editor from Entertainment Weekly praised the song's instrumentation writing, I like the brisk waltz tempo of Forever. In 2020, Billboard ranked it as the 100th greatest song of Carey's career. I definitely think that Forever could have been a successful single, how they actually promoted it, but I kind of feel like they didn't do that, because Once We Did was already #1 for 16 weeks, so they're probably like, oh, we already had our ballad moments. But I definitely think that it could have done something on the charts. I kind of feel like they dropped the ball there. Forever is an amazing song, a big lush ballad that I really do love, and so that's my thoughts on Forever. And so the last single was going to be Underneath the Stars, and it was released on November 19th, 1996, and this would be the B-side to Forever in Australia. And so it only received a limited number of pressings in the US, and due to this, it was ineligible to chart on the Billboard Hot 100. It did chart at #69 on the R&B Hip Hop Airplay Component chart in 96, and it also made the top 40 on the US Adult R&B Songs chart, peaking at #35. And so this is something that got praise from music reviewers. So this tends to be a fan favorite. This is my personal favorite Mariah song. She said that it's one of her favorites as well. And regarding it, she says, Underneath the Stars has a real 70s vibe. We even put those scratches you hear on old records to give it that kind of flavor. It was a good place to start because it got me into the head of making an album that was more R&B, more in the vibe of the Minnie Riperton era, which has always been an inspiration to me. And And so she was definitely upset that this wasn't pushed as a single properly and they didn't give it the real promotion, because she really did love this record and thinks it's some of her best work. Daydream would be released on October 3rd, 1995. It would peak at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart. It was successful globally, going number 1 in 9 countries and reached top 5 in almost every major music market. And it would be certified 11 times platinum by the RIAA. As of 2019, Daydream has sold over 20 million copies worldwide and is one of the best-selling albums of all time. Daydream was the second best-selling album of 1996 and the 18th best-selling album of the 1990s decade in the US. In Canada, Daydream would peak at number 2 on the chart, and it was certified 7 times platinum there. And it was also very successful in Europe, where it would reach number 1 in Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and the UK. In France, Daydream peaked at number 2 and was certified double platinum as well. And Daydream will be certified triple platinum in Europe. In Australia, Daydream was certified 5 times platinum, and the album finished 9th on the REN charts in the year 1995 and 1996. In Japan, the album would go number 1 on the Oricon chart, and Daydream would make the top 5 of the best-selling albums in Japan by non-Asian artists, with 2.2 million copies sold. It would later be included on the list of 200 definitive albums in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so this one did receive critical acclaim. A lot of reviewers thought that it was her best album yet. So a lot of people think that this is basically a concept album. And so with the title Daydream, she essentially said, you know, she was daydreaming a lot of that time.
Daydream, I mean, the title itself. I mean, do you daydream that much?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know if more than other people, but I just thought that the theme and the vibe of some of the songs kind of gave off that sort of dreamy feeling, and so I thought it would be kind of appropriate.
Her assistant tried to dissuade her from doing that, but she was like, no, like that really was my life at the time, just like daydreaming and everything. So you already have the title, and so that kind of like puts it into your mind, right? But with a record like Fantasy, for example, she's just saying, you know, I wish you were here with me, but it's just a fantasy. And then on a record like Underneath the Stars, you also have Melt Away and a song like I Am Free, for example. And the whole record really does have this, but those three in particular. There's a very lush production throughout the entire record. You can tell that she's daydreaming. It is beautiful to listen to. And so you're kind of just riding along that journey with her, right? And then we get to the Daydream interlude, and then she's reminding you like, hey, it's just a fantasy, like it's not real, and kind of just like waking you up from that kind of. And then you get to Looking In, and now this is a big moment on the record, and I feel like this is something that's really bone chilling to listen to. And I feel like this is just something that really shattered people's perceptions of her at the time. Because if you didn't know that she grew up poor and just like everything that she went through at the time, you would think, oh, she's just some diva, she's just some pop star, and just like very surface level. Probably didn't think she wrote any of her songs or anything like that, and a lot of people didn't realize, you know, how deep she actually was as a person. And so basically on the song, she's saying, you know, you're looking from the outside in, you think I have the life, I'm rich, I'm famous, and all that, and I'm at the top of the world, but I'm actually not. Like, I'm just putting on a facade. Like, I'm really going through it at this time, because she was just suffering so much in her marriage to Tommy. And like she was kind of saying earlier, she felt like she couldn't have personal and professional success at the same time. And a lot of people say, you know, if you look at like videos or pictures from her at the time, you can tell that there's kind of like a sadness behind her eyes. And so I feel like for a lot of people listening to the song, it was like, wow, it was just kind of a shocking moment on the record in comparison to everything else. It has like this really sparse production with this haunting piano over it, and the vocal performance is something that is more subdued, but I think is really necessary for the song, and the lyrics just really shine on here as well. And especially that last verse is particularly heartbreaking, whenever she says, well, here I am for all of them to bleed, but they can't take my heart from me, and they can't bring me to my knees. They'll never know the real me. Like I said, this is something that's bone chilling. She wrote this alone in like 15 minutes. She said it was kind of just flowing out of her, and she basically said that she had to sneak this on the album. And listening to it, it's almost kind of like, in a sense, like she's crying for help and just trying to tell people like, I'm a human, like humanize me, you know, like I really am going through it. And it just kind of seemed like that. And it was definitely her most personal and vulnerable song to date, and I feel like it is just a very important moment on the record, and this can kind of be jarring to hear in context of it, you know, just with everything else on it.
I just wanted to say that it's really unfortunate that she couldn't enjoy her commercial success during this time, because her personal life was so miserable with her marriage to Tommy and everything, and just what a shame, because this is one of her most popular albums and she was huge at this time. The album was a smash, you know, she had huge singles for it as well. She was literally everywhere, and so it's really unfortunate that she wasn't able to enjoy all of it. And I'm just really glad that overall she was able to get out of that situation and enjoy the commercial success whenever she did the Emancipation Mimi, for sure. I can appreciate this era for what it is. Like, whenever I think about main pop girl eras, this is always one of the ones that pops into my mind first. I love the album, of course, but you know, having that in context, I feel like is something important to note.
Also, I wanted to say that this song really reminds me of Portrait from the Caution album. To me, it was kind of like she listened to this record, you know, and she was like, let me hear it from a different perspective. Now that I've been doing more, like the lyrical themes always seemed pretty similar as well. And it was something that's just really fascinating to me, because like we always have to remember, just because, you know, we think someone's happy because they're a celebrity and like, oh, they have it all, like you never really know what they're going through. And it was a really vulnerable song for her as well. Overall, I do feel like this is an amazing album. I really love her vocal on here. The vocal layering truly was next level. All the riffs and runs and everything just vocally was so satisfying to listen to. I love the lush production all over this thing and just what she tapped into with that, and shout out to all the producers on this album, of course. And I also really loved her songwriting on here. I thought that it was strong and a huge step up from Music Box, and I'm really glad that she was able to get back more so into her R&B roots. I'm glad with the success of a song like the Fantasy remix that Tommy really couldn't deny her to be able to work with more producers that she wanted to and kind of see her vision out more. And I do think that this is one of her best albums for sure, and it's definitely pop perfection and just one of my favorite albums of all time. So while I do hold this album in high regard, I definitely think concessions had to be made. Essentially, I feel like she got very close with what she wanted to do with this album, but I feel like she was only going to get so much creative control because at the end of the day, she was still married to Tommy Mottola. Like I said, very controlling over her career and her personal life and stuff, right? And so the label was very hesitant about letting her collaborate with rappers and things like that because they just didn't want to mess up the formula and everything. And so I feel like they definitely encouraged her to do a couple of ballads so she wouldn't really lose the audience that she gained up to that point. And so, you know, we have records like Open Arms, When I Saw You Forever. Like, these are songs I feel like were concessions on this album for sure. And so basically the reason why I think that is I don't really think that she cares for the songs that much at all. Like, I watched this one interview and unfortunately I think it's been deleted. Hopefully I can find it again and link it down below in the description. You guys know what I'm talking about and you have a link, leave it down below. But basically in this interview, you know, they were asking her about When I Saw You, and she just didn't really seem like she cared for the song that much. Like, she was trying to move on and saying like, well, Underneath the Stars is my favorite song in the album, so I didn't really think she really cared about it that much from watching that one interview. And then also I remember I saw this tweet and someone was like, oh, can you perform Open Arms? And she was like, oh, if you get 327,000 retweets, which means she doesn't like the song, because that is a tall order to ask, and yeah, she doesn't really care for it. And then also you have a song like Forever, and I saw that she said she didn't like it, and then she said that it grew on her, so I don't know how much, maybe just a little bit. I definitely think, you know, records like those for sure were concessions to be made. And, you know, we do have a song like One Sweet Day. For the record, I don't think that's a concession, obviously, because we know it's more personal, you know, about things that she was going through, and the Boyz II Men were managers, so obviously that was their idea, and that's something that they wanted to do. But I know that this is something the label loved because it's this huge, grand, sweeping ballad, and you know, it has Boyz II Men on it, and it was so successful at #1 for 16 weeks. So I think with records like that, they were like, okay, like, you can mostly do what you want. Like, she had more control, but she didn't fully have control yet. Like, I think she got pretty close to what she wanted to do, but I don't think she was able to fully get to that vision until a record like Butterfly, which we will talk about later.
Like, on an album as big as Daydream, I was still under the control of a huge conglomerate that didn't want me to go to urban. So even after 3 huge hits, Fantasy, which the pop people were only allowed to know it was a pop song. They didn't know the ODB version. Now everybody knows that because, you know.
That was the version.
Right. But to the Suits, that wasn't the version.
Okay.
So, you know, and then One Sweet Day and then Always Remember Baby. Still, they made me put out like a real straightforward ballad, and I wrote it. I know how to do that, you know, afterwards. But I wanted a song called Underneath the Stars, which to me is some of my best writing, lyrically, melodically, and in every way, and it was never released.
In terms of fan favorites, I would definitely say Underneath the Stars, Melt Away, Looking In, Always Be My Baby, One Sweet Day, and Fantasy. And so in terms of promotion for this album, she would perform at Madison Square Garden, and the show would sell out. And so this was going to be filmed and released as a DVD titled Fantasy, Mariah Carey at Madison Square Garden. She would also go on her second headlining tour, and she would go to Japan and certain European countries, and she didn't visit the United States. All the shows were spaced apart, that way she would have time to rest her voice, because she said it's very hard to sing her songs back to back. And so she would also have sold out shows in France, Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK as well. She was even able to sell at the Tokyo Dome in Japan, which has a capacity of 150,000 people, and so that is something that is worth noting there. I wanted to say that the Tokyo Dome concert was amazing. I love her rendition of Just Be Good to Me and Underneath the Stars. And she would receive positive reviews as well. She would go on various TV shows and programs to promote the record. And so in terms of awards, she would win 2 awards at the American Music Awards, and so she would receive Favorite Pop Rock Female Artist and Favorite Soul R&B Female Artist. At the World Music Awards, she would get Best Selling Female R&B Artist, World's Best Selling Overall Female Recording Artist, World's Best Selling Pop Artist, and World's Best Selling Overall Recording Artist. And now let's talk about the Grammys. So she would open up the ceremony performing One Sweet Day. Boyz II Men gave an amazing performance, right? And she would be nominated for 6 Grammy Awards, and she ends up winning none of them. And this was something that was shocking because she was predicted to win a lot of awards, and so this definitely caused a lot of controversy at the time. And so regarding Mariah's feelings about it, she essentially said she didn't really expect to win anything. She had hoped that One Sweet Day would win something just because it was something that helped a lot of people through tough times. And she also basically said maybe they had a problem with my situation being intertwined with the label, basically because of her marriage to Tommy Mottola at the time. And like, maybe that does have something to do with it as well, so that's definitely something that I think about.
Also, something worth noting is she basically basically said, you know, she was very popular at the time, obviously, and whenever it was her time to win big, they were like, oh, let's give it to someone who is more obscure, and it's not about what the most popular song is. But then whenever it wasn't her time to win, they were like, oh, let's give it to the popular song. So she basically felt like they were always changing the rules whenever it was her time to win as well, and I feel like that's something that's very important to note. And I can definitely see that because this happened to her again with the whole Emancipation Mimi era that I'm not going to get into, but yeah, they definitely followed her egregious.
But this is something that is still shocking to me to this day, because nominated for 6 awards, to open up the ceremony, give an incredible performance, and to go home with nothing, one of the biggest Grammy snubs. Like, I feel like she should have won all of those awards, of course. And this is why I say that the Grammys are racist, and if you don't believe me, go look up their track record, go look at how many black people won Album of the Year. It's literally a handful. She basically said on the bright side, at least she got to hang out with like Wanya from Boyz II Men and also Brandy as well. But at least she got to leave her house and she could appreciate that aspect about it. But yeah, the fact that she only has 5 Grammys overall is something that is incredibly egregious. She has been snubbed way too many times, and I don't blame her for not caring about them anymore, because in my opinion, she should definitely be one of the most awarded artists at the ceremony. Also, something that's worth noting is while she was recording the Daydream album, she would work on an alternative rock album called Someone's Ugly Daughter. And so she basically said at the time that she wanted to release this and not put her name on it and just let people find out that it was her, but the label didn't let her do that, so she basically had her friend Clarissa just sing the lead vocals, and she's still on background vocals throughout the entire record. Regarding the album, she says, though I was recording Daydream, parts of my life were still quite a nightmare. I was writing and singing upbeat songs like Always Be My Baby and sweeping ballads like One Sweet Day. I was totally inspired by the creative risk we took and collaborating with ODB on the Fantasy remix. I was exploring my musical range, but I was also filled with rage. It's always been a challenge for me to acknowledge and express my anger. My personal life was suffocating during Daydream, and I was in desperate need of a release. Music and humor have always been my 2 greatest releases. They have been how I survived all the anguish in my life. I totally looked forward to doing my alter ego band sessions after Daydream each night. Tommy was off in Italy a lot at the time, so I had a little space and air to do this bizarre, fun thing that was just for me. The band loved it, and we ended up with an album's worth of songs, so she mixed in everything. My Jokey Anger Release project ended up being a weirdly good, satirical, underground alternative rock thing. But Tommy and some of the other label folks heard it. They couldn't believe we had done all of that while recording Daydream. She also basically said that they would drive around just singing out the top of their lungs as well. So basically, she said she lost her lead vocals at some point, but she has found them and she's going to release it. And so this is something that I am very excited for because I haven't heard the record at this point in time, so I'm really excited for her version of it as well. And this is just something that's really fascinating to me because it's really a contrast from the Daydream album. In 1996, she would do the background vocals on Every Time I Close My Eyes by Babyface, which is stunning. Basically, in terms of the marriage, it was something that was really strained at this point. And so essentially they went to therapy, you know, trying to talk things out and whatever. And eventually the therapist got Tommy to agree to let Mariah, you know, go out and do her own thing. They would basically go out to certain events and they would be together for like the photo ops, and then after that they would split off and do their own things there. Also during the marriage, she said that Tommy forbade her from doing acting, and she basically said that there were some big roles that she just wasn't able to do, stuff that she didn't even know about till later because he just wasn't going to let it happen basically, and it was something she always wanted to pursue really. And then basically the therapist encouraged Tommy to let her take acting classes, so she would go to the acting coach, and basically they told her to do this exercise, just breathing in and breathing out and thinking of a place where she felt safe. She couldn't think of anywhere, and then she just bust out into tears and started crying to the point where she didn't really think that she'd be able to stop. And on this she says, I don't think I had cried openly the entire time I had been in the relationship with Tommy. Crying with him would have taken too much cleanup and the emotional cost was too expensive. It surely punished me if I cried. He was the one who cried during some of our more explosive arguments, and I would end up consoling him, completely abandoning my needs, my pain. It was ruthlessly manipulative. He had control over me as an artist, he had control over my personal life, he had control over everyone in my professional life. And even though I was the biggest artist on the label, he was still the most powerful person in my life and seemingly everyone's life. Everyone was scared to death of Tommy. The executives, the management, legal, other artists, everyone. In January of 1997, Mariah would start working on her 6th studio album, Butterfly, and they would announce their separation on May 30th, 1997.
The singer is separating from her husband, Sony Music President Tommy Mottola, on a trial basis. That according to publicists for the pair. They were married in June 1993. Publicists say the couple remain friends and will continue their business relationship. Carey has recorded most of her biggest hits on the Sony label.
And so discussing a little bit, she says, I never thought I would be strong enough to leave Tommy. I thought I would just continue to deal with it. I prayed he would realize how he was stifling me and that he would do the work and things would change. There's also been interviews that I watched during like the Number Ones era or also during Rainbow where she's talking about the marriage a little bit and kind of trying to be honest about it, while at the same time she can't really fully go into it because she was still on the label at the time. So she's walking a fine line, so you can tell that there's more that she wants to say that she doesn't really get into. So I will put them right here.
As the man you were married to, how dominant was his influence on that, certainly what you obviously have now marked as a part of Mariah Carey's career?
Well, when he's very involved with someone's career, as he is with a lot of the artists on the label now, myself not included. He can be a very helpful force because he's very good at what he does. He understands music because he used to be a musician, and he's understands marketing and all those things. And so I didn't feel like I could just put my foot down and have a tantrum and say, well, I want this song to come out, or I want this type of video, or I don't want to wear my hair curly tonight, or I don't want to wear a dress down to the floor and up to the neck, you know what I mean? It was like sort of, you know, I would fight, but I would always give in because it was easier than just having a constant battle.
Were you a bird in a cage?
I guess people have said that, you know. I mean, there were good and bad moments in everything, you know.
Without him, would you be where you are today?
I believe so.
And what tells you that inside?
Because I believed it since I was 4 years old, and because I'm a very determined person, and because my mother taught me to believe that, to not say if I make it, to say when I make it, and because I work harder than anybody I know, and I never would have given up, even if it, you know, still hadn't happened until now, I'd still be working. And I do credit Tommy for a vision, you know, sharing a lot of my vision in the beginning, but at a certain point, an artist grows, a person grows, a human being grows, and if someone stifles that person at a certain point, and I'm not saying he stifled me, but I'm just saying in general,
yeah, sure.
At a certain point, anybody is gonna snap and have to fly.
To ask you a short question about Tommy Mottola and the marriage you had and the separation. A very short question, because I thought you were so, listen, I thought you were so brave doing that.
Thank you.
From where did you get that courage?
I grew up with a pretty dysfunctional life and family, and I grew up a lot. My mother is great and beautiful, I love her, but I had a lot of weird kind of craziness in my life that went on, and I was independent from the time I was a teenager, living alone, and so I had strength, but then I was put into this other kind of situation which squashed my real spirit a lot. And that's why people say, oh, you dress differently now, you do this, you do that. But I was so, like, afraid of not listening to the corporate structure, of not going along with things, that I stayed in a situation that was unhappy. And I'm not saying that there weren't things that were happy in that situation, because I did love him, and he did make me feel a sense of safety and a sense of family that in a lot of ways I didn't have.
But did you have a friend to talk to about this that said, go ahead, do it, I'm here supporting you?
What happened was I got to a point in my life where I was pretty much like at the breaking point, where it was either leave or die. And it's still politically hard, so I don't want this to come across like I'm bashing anybody, because there were good things and there were bad things for both of us.
I'm sure there were, yeah. But it's still, you're a tough girl. I like that.
Thank you.
And you seem very happy now.
I'm much happier now.
That's good.
You look back on your marriage, what do you think went wrong?
I think that I wasn't ready to be a married person. I think that it was too early in life for me. I think that I had absolutely no experience with any kind of relationship. Again, being someone independent, to me the marriage was the end of the relationship. Prior to that, things were better. If I could have just been myself, you know, things would have been, I'm not saying I would have been still in that situation, but I'm just saying the problem stemmed from not being allowed to be myself, to be who I was, to show my personality, to just have any sense of freedom at all. And it's like if you take a wild, and I'm not calling myself a wild animal, but if you keep a cat in a cage or something and you never let it out and it was once free, it's going to end up resenting you, and if you let it out, it's going to leave.
Because she left Tommy at this time, he wasn't controlling how her music sounded anymore, so she could finally incorporate more hip-hop into her music like she had wanted to do in the past, but she was kind of dissuaded in doing so, and they didn't really let it happen. So on this album, she would work with various producers. She would work with Walter once again, and then you also have P. Diddy on here as well. Missy Elliott on the song Baby Doll, which is definitely giving Aaliyah 1 in a Million vibes, and so that's something worth noting, and I saw an interesting clip, which I'll put here about that.
Baby Doll.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is adventurous.
Mm-hmm. I wrote that with Missy Elliott.
Yes.
And do you guys, is Missy
big down there?
Yeah, well, she's breaking down there.
Okay, so they have I Can't Stand the Rain, so they're
Yeah.
So I really wanted to work with her because I think she's a great writer, and she's really on the cutting edge of R&B, where R&B is going. And
great voice, too.
Yeah, she's got a great voice, and that's, when I first heard her, it was on an MC Light record, I think that Puffy had done, and she was rapping, and it's the first time I heard her do that hee-hee-how thing, and then she was singing, and I'm like, the same girl that's singing is the one that's rapping right there? And then I started hearing more of her music and the songs she wrote for other people, like Aaliyah and stuff. So we got together, and I had already written the hook, I Want to Be Your Baby Doll, that whole part. But what was different about that, I went to Virginia, I met her, I met Timberland, we did the whole thing, and she's just really cool. And you know, I said, how would you approach this melody in the verses? Because I already had an idea for what I would have done, but it was much more of my style, like more free, kind of flowing over the music. And she approaches things from like more of the repetition, like a rhythmic thing. So she started with the da-na-na, that little thing that we did with the 211, that little part. Can't sing today, didn't get enough sleep, we won't go into that. But so she and I collaborated on the lyrics, and we wrote it in the hotel room. We were drinking champagne. She was already hungover from the night before. She fell asleep halfway through the writing session, so I had to finish it alone. And she knows I'm going to tell people that, so she doesn't care. Because she had been to Timberland's party the night before, so she was tired. So on the album credits, that's why I said, no more Cristal for you. She couldn't handle it, but it was good. She really added a new dimension to that.
And then she would also work with track masters as well. Also, this was something that Sony was against as well, because they were wondering how commercially successful her music was going to be. And, you know, she definitely did have a lot of creative differences with them during this time, and also with Walter as well. A lot of critics were against this. They were like, why are you taking such an R&B turn? Like, what happened to the ballads and things like that? And she just got a lot more pushback for going more R&B, and she was basically accused of hopping onto R&B because it was what was popular at the time. And she said, this isn't true. This is who has always been. You know, they wanted me to be balance appeal. I was incorporating into the remix. And so I'll have some clips that I'll put here of her explaining it really well.
I actually did collaborate with, I worked with Old Dirty Bastard in 1995 when I was still in that whole thing. And he's one of the most creative, outspoken people in rap music, we must say. And we did a song called Fantasy, but it was just the remix. It wasn't on the album. So a lot of people who don't listen to hip-hop radio or who don't go to clubs wouldn't have known that. You know, I worked with DeBrat and Jermaine Dupri and those guys back then too. But it was always, you know, pretty much for a remix or something that was only catering to one audience, and the pop stations never heard it, or, you know, basically the people who watch the mass appeal, you know, shows on VH1 or something don't see the version with ODB and me, you know. So they saw me working with Puffy and working with different people on the Butterfly album, and they were like, what is this drastic change? You know, why is she with rappers suddenly? But really, it was something that I had...
It was an evolution from where you'd already begun.
Yeah, and I wasn't, you know, it wasn't like those versions were incorporated into the album then, because it was all about keeping it mass appeal. Yeah. So, to me, we're at the year 2000, it is mass appeal. I mean, I've grown up listening to rap music. It's nothing new, you know? I mean, it's really been around for over 20 years. It's not a new thing.
And rhythm and blues longer.
Yeah. So, I mean, my first song, Vision of Love, was #1 on the R&B charts first, then pop. So, I mean, I think it went more, everybody wanted me to go more pop because it's always easier to be mass appeal, you know, but that's boring to me. I can't just do that. It's really boring. Like, I would go crazy.
Well, you know what, especially with this album, Butterfly, I feel like what I did was incorporate where I was going with the remixes onto the regular album. I don't think I made a drastic change.
Right.
I think people who say I made a drastic change are saying that for a reason. Maybe to deter, I don't know, the ones who want me to sing Only Hero from buying the album, but there are ballads on the album that are in that vein. I just tried to taper the amount of production that went onto them. I tried to tone it down a little bit. Right. You know, but keeping the songs accessible. I mean, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to totally alienate half my audience, you know. I mean, I have the ballads on there. I have the new single, My All, which is the video debuted yesterday. Herbert's directed it.
was great working with him.
And also the media was always suggesting that she was dating all the rappers that she worked with and stuff. So she was just getting a lot of heat at this time for her music direction and her personal life as well. And so Honey was going to be the lead single for the album, and it was released on July 29th, 1997, and it would become her 12th #1 single on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and it would stay there for 3 weeks, and it would also go at #1 in Canada as well, and it would reach top 5 in New Zealand, Spain, and the UK, and it was certified platinum by the RAAA. She says, I brought Stevie, Puffy, and Q-Tip, one of the coolest and most creative guys out there, together for what would become the album's lead single, Honey. I had begun the lyrics and basic melody in Puerto Rico. Q-Tip made this amazing sample of Body Rock by the Treacherous 3. I also told them I wanted to incorporate the 1984 hit Hey DJ by the world famous Supreme Team. Little did they know it was a secret shout out to Derek Jeter. Honey was a song about jonesing for that DJ feeling. When I played Honey for Tommy, he quipped, well, I'm glad you were so inspired. The bitterness. I was like, what? Now you're mad? Why didn't you get mad about Fantasy or Dream Lover? It's blatantly obvious I wasn't talking about Tommy in that song. I wasn't talking about him or any actual person in practically any romantic song. Before I met Derek, they were mostly imaginary characters. I'm sure Tommy could sense that the songs written for Butterfly were no longer about far-off fictional lovers. These songs, though certainly poetically embellished, were full of specific details and sensual realness. Tommy and the label were also resistant to what my new sound represented. Again, I reheard the refrain Too Urban, which of course was code for Too Black, and yeah, I wasn't ever going back. In regards to the music video, Mariah basically said that this was the first time she was able to do what she actually wanted, and in the past she kind of had to do an homogenized version of what she wanted because, you know, anything that like pushed sexuality or any of that, like the label and Tommy like weren't really with that, so it just like wasn't really gonna happen. And the video was just something that was different in comparison in the past. She's showing more skin and just something that is really fun to watch, and I do think that it's an iconic music video overall for sure, and definitely one of her most notable and important music videos throughout the entire career. And I definitely feel like it showed a different side to her, and it was something that really fit with the song as well.
You know, I think it was a moment in time that people saw such a transition between the girl that was always really covered up to jumping into a pool in the Honey video in my Gucci stilettos and ripping off the dress and being in the James Bond bikini, which I loved and I lived for.
Honey garnered acclaimed response from contemporary music critics. David Brown from Entertainment Weekly described the importance the song held for Carey's musical transition. He wrote, "You're prepared for a song on which Carey finally breaks free of her contemporary change and gets down." He felt Honey sounded as anyone striking out on his or her own, caught between old and new habits and taking cautious baby steps into the future. Brown also commented that Carey showed a commendable vocal restraint in the song, showing some admirable restraints. She nestles herself into the downy soft beats of Honey. Rich Uzak from Slant complimented the song, calling it awakening, both sensually and musically. Honey exemplifies the abrupt gear shifting that appreciating Mariah the artist requires. Its new pop brilliance doesn't always come easy, where detecting it depends on the audience's newfound ability to apply Carey's pop life to pop music. Honey was also nominated for 2 Grammy Awards at the 1998 ceremony for Best Female R&B Vocal Performance and Best R&B Song. Butterfly would be the second single for the album, and it was released on September 29th, 1997, but it was only released as an airplay-only single due to her conflict with the label at the time. It would reach number 16 on the Hot 100 airplay chart. In Canada, it would peak at number 22, staying on the chart for 14 weeks, and it had a limited success in Europe due to the fact that it wasn't commercially released. In the UK, the song peaked at 22, staying in the chart for 6 weeks. In France and the Netherlands, the song would peak at number 43 and 52 respectively. In Australia, it would peak at number 27 and would spend 10 weeks on the charts. It charted at number 15 in New Zealand. Butterfly was nominated for the 1998 Grammy Award for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. Regarding the song, she said, "I wrote in Butterfly what I had so hoped Tommy would be able to see and say to me. Blindly, I imagined I could keep you under glass. Now I understand to hold you, I must open up my hands and watch you rise. Spread your wings and prepare to fly, for you have become a butterfly. Oh, fly abandonedly into the sun. If you should return to me, we truly were meant to be. So spread your wings and fly, butterfly."
Also, something that's worth noting is that she basically started the song off as the reprise, and then she was like, oh, I want to build it out into an entire song, right? And so basically she said after like the lyrics came to her and everything, she was leaving Sing Sing at the time, and basically she was going over to this mantle that she wanted to keep, and she was looking at it, and the person who made it for her carved in a butterfly, and this wasn't something that she asked for. She said that its open wings were like the sign that she needed to leave that situation basically, and yeah, butterflies just have a big significance to her. Obviously we have this album Butterfly, she's always wearing these butterfly rings, and so that's something that's worth noting, and I thought that that was a really important and cool tie-in.
Breakdown was the third single released in January 1998, and this is a collaboration with Crazy and Wishbone of Bone Thugs and Harmony. This is something that would again receive a limited worldwide release due to to her conflict with the label at the time, only being released in certain countries. In the US, it peaked at number 4 on the Hot R&B Hip Hop Songs charts, and also in New Zealand as well. It also remained top 40 in Australia, and there was also a remix of the song that was promoted to US radio stations, and it would debut on the Billboard Hot R&B Hip Hop Airplay Singles chart in September to October 1997. It wasn't commercially released in the US until April of 1998 as a double A-side single with My All. And the single peaked at number 4, even though it wasn't released as a single in the UK. It charted with My All on the UK singles chart for 1 week, peaking at 98, and Breakdown would receive a lot of critical acclaim for the transition into R&B. And so this was something that was interesting because she really adapted to their cadence, and I really love how Crazy Bone and Wishbone were incorporated into the song, of course, and I really love the juxtaposition of her vocal delivery over the track, and just everything works together really well. So this is one of my favorite Mariah songs. I also wanted to say that the story behind the song is really interesting. In this interview that she did for Rolling Stone, she actually told the entire thing. I'll leave it linked down below in the description if you want to check it out. It's at like the very end. I think it's like the last 15 minutes or something like that. It's kind of like a hidden part, but it's really cool, so definitely listen to that because it definitely gives you more context on the record overall, I'd say. I love the music video. The color palette is incredible. Her best music video in my personal opinion, and I'm pretty sure she said that she had to pay for it or something like that, and it almost didn't happen. I'm really thankful for the music video. Shout out to Diane Martel for directing it, and it was just so much better than I could have thought. This song could have been a huge record. Like she said, the Crossroads was big at the time, and so it just really frustrates me with not only how they fumbled the bag on this record, but also on all the singles for this album as well. Like, it should have been a bigger record, and the way that they sabotage it is just something that I'll never get over. Breakdown served as the album's 3rd single in the US, New Zealand, and Australia. The Roof was released receiving an airplay only release. It was only given a commercial release in Europe, while Breakdown was released throughout Oceania in Europe, peaking at number 96 in the UK and number 63 in the Netherlands. The Roof was praised by critics for its vocals, instrumentation, and lyrics. The Roof would be produced by the Trackmasters, and it would incorporate Shook Ones Part 2 by Mobb Deep as a sample, and then it also incorporated Rockbox by Rum DMC as well. And so this is a song about an experience that she had with Derek Jeter. I would highly recommend reading the book because she tells the story very well, but this is something that is a fan favorite on the album, and it just really paints a good picture with the lyrics and everything. Definitely some of her best work. My All would be released as the 5th single for the album, and it was only the 2nd commercial release on April 21st, 1998. And My All is a slow R&B ballad with Latin guitars, and it would debut at number 2 behind Next Is Too Close, and it would eventually become her 13th number 1 single, placing her in 4th place for the most number 1s in the US, and would also give her the most number 1 singles for a female artist, and it would stay at number 1 for 1 week, and it was certified platinum by the RIAA. It performed mildly throughout Europe, peaking at number 4 in the UK and the top 10 in Belgium, Bologna, France, Spain, and Switzerland. My All was acclaimed by critics. BBC said it encapsulated her more traditional straight ballad approach with Latin overtones. Billboard praised the song, calling it an anthemic gem. David Brown from Entertainment Weekly praised the song's instrumentation, noting with its gently plucked guitars is the best Babyface track Babyface never produced. In the book she said, this song was about life and death, and I didn't want it to get lost in any over-the-top schmaltz. I needed it to be strong and simple. I wanted the vocals to be the centerpiece, a vocal point in the mix with a stripped down track behind them. It was all about the emotion, the soul, and I sang it as if my life depended on it. Butterfly would be released on September 16th, 1997, and it would peak at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart in the US. Butterfly was certified 5 times platinum by the RIAA. The album was successful internationally, going number 1 in Australia, Canada, Greece, Japan, the Netherlands, and in Hong Kong. Butterfly finished as one of the 20 best-selling foreign albums of 1997, receiving a platinum certification by IFPI. Globally, Butterfly has sold over 10 million copies, and it received acclaim from music critics. In the new Rolling Stone album guide, Aaron Berger praised the album's producers and Carey's more controlled vocals. Berger noticed a connection between much of Carey's lyrics and her separation from Matola. John Perellas, editor of the New York Times, called Butterfly a new turn in Carey's career. He wrote, Carey sold tens of millions of albums by being the girl next door with the startling vocal range, but for most of Butterfly, Carey turned her voice into an airy whisper, as if she would rather charm listeners compared to overpowering them. Aside from commenting on its deviance from Carey's previous work, he noted songs in which Carey alludes to her failed marriage to Matola, such as Butterfly and Close My Eyes, which were released on the album following the divorce, with lyrics about letting love go and life struggles. Additionally, he wrote, since Carey writes her own lyrics, fans might expect a glimpse of marital discord or pride in her newfound autonomy. Overall, this is a very monumental album for her, and she said that it's her favorite album that she's done, and I feel like there's multiple reasons why. That kind of ties into why I think that it's her best album. And so, first off, she was able to have a lot more artistic freedom, and she was able to incorporate more hip-hop into her music and work with certain producers. She was able to go even more R&B than she did on Daydream because she had the artistic freedom to do so. So I feel like that's very important. She was able to do what she wanted to sonically, and I feel like that really pays off in a record like Breakdown featuring Crazy Bone and Wishbone for sure. Also, I think that this is her artistic peak. The vocals on here are insane to listen to. I really love the background vocals, the vocal layering, the lead vocals, and I feel like she's the best at doing that. It really shines on a song like 4th of July or Outside or Baby Doll, for example, even Honey as well. And then also there's more personal songwriting on here and just talking about things that she's been through through, and I feel like her songwriting is the best on this album out of all the albums that she's done. Close My Eyes, which is a song that she wrote over 4 years and it's very personal to her. Outside, which is just something that's so powerful to listen to. And she said that this was about being biracial. This is something that is more so of a fan favorite because you can apply it to so many different situations. So fans who are gay or who have just felt outcast, you know, in certain situations really relate to this record as well. So that's definitely a stand-up. My All, The Roof, and I really love lyrics on a song like 4th of July, for example. Like, I really love the way that she describes rain on that song. Such an excellent songwriter. I really love Baby Doll whenever she says, do you care for me beyond idolization? I just feel like you really get to know a lot more of her on this album, and it's just something that is very vulnerable overall, and I really appreciate that about it. I also think that the production on here is just incredible. Another reason this was monumental is she had a lot more control in her personal life as well, and so she was really able to express herself. She was finally able to wear what she wanted to show more skin, and just like have the image that she actually wanted to in terms of that. People always talk about the dress that she wore at the 1997 VMAs, which is really iconic in its own right, but a lot of good looks during this time, I would say. And then also she basically said like, oh, I can finally show my personality now, because basically she said whenever she started, like, they really encouraged her not to have a personality. Basically, a lot of people thought that she was bland and that she would just sing the records and go home. She's like, I've always been this kind of person, but I was essentially stifled, and so she was able to be who she actually was.
Now I'm being the person that I am. Okay. Now I'm allowing myself to come across and for people to know that, yes, I do have a personality. You know, I do speak. I don't just stand at the microphone, sing, and go home and, like, you know, sit in silence. I mean, it's like I've always been someone who has a voice, not just to sing, but, you know, to speak. I have, you know, a personality, and I've experienced a lot of stuff in this industry. I've seen a lot of things even prior to being in the industry, and it's affected me as a person. And I don't know, I guess the biggest pressure is just maintaining my composure through a lot of unnecessary drama and things that arise that I have to deal with. And it's not like, you know, I'm the last person to get on the soapbox or like, woe is me, you know, life is so hard, trust me, things could be worse. I'm just happy that I'm where I'm at. I feel like Butterfly is the best album that I've done. I feel like I'm in a really good place creatively. I'm finally getting to be myself and do the things that I want to do. You know, certain people will perceive it as, oh, she's trying to change her image, or she's trying to be more like this, she's trying to be more like that. And the fact of the matter is, I'm just finally getting to be you. Yeah, getting to be me, and that's a good place to be. So if with that comes drama and unnecessary things, then that's what it has to be, you know.
I think that's a big part of why people have this misconception about me, that I'm this, or maybe they don't have it anymore, but that I was this really bland, just sing up there, stand on
like
stage.
sitting up in Bedford and then going to do
and other people probably think other people write my songs or do those things, because of it was more like fashioning the look and the image and keeping it one way, which was non-threatening, which was not necessarily me, which was not necessarily the most fun thing to do, which is sort of why when I had the whole Butterfly album, which was symbolic of me moving on and things like that, people were like, whoa, she's dressing sexy, and oh, what's she doing, and she's trying to make a statement. It's like, look, I've always been like this. You can see pictures of me when I'm 6 years old sitting on a beach posing. You know what I mean? That was always me. But it was toned down for a number of reasons, some of which I probably were more personal than professional. But and it did work in the beginning for me to be really plain and simple and non-threatening and let people focus on my voice. So I think that worked. But after you do that and you're growing up at the same time, you want to be able to express yourself musically. You know, you want to look the way you want to look. You want to. It's fun. You made enough videos at this point. You know, with curly hair. You know, in a field or standing in a dress. It's like, you know, can I move on a little bit and grow? You know, expand. I mean, until 2 years ago, I had to have one side of my freaking face covered or bangs or something all the time, because I was always, you know, I was told that I didn't look right that way, or wearing a certain color would make me look too something, you know. I mean, it was always something playing on my insecurities. There was always, you know, that whole thing. I grew up insecure to begin with. I didn't need those things to be, you know,
actually preyed upon.
I feel like her confidence really shines through during this era, and that's very important. Not only did she have more artistic freedom, she had the freedom in her personal life, and this marked a shift in her career, and it's just something that is so important and monumental on all fronts. And I definitely think that it's a strong album as well. A lot of fan favorite tracks on this, and so due to those reasons, that is why it is held in such high regard by the Lambs and also Mariah, of course. And she was definitely ahead of her time with this, and I found a clip where basically she was saying the same thing, and I'll put it here.
If I had to rate my own stuff, I definitely still love Butterfly as an album. I think, not to be like, whoa, I'm so ahead of my time, but perhaps it was a little ahead of its time because songs like Breakdown and songs like, even like, I did a duet with Drew Hill on that record of a remake of The Beautiful Ones, and Baby Doll was still one of my favorites. I was playing it the other day when I was getting ready, and Tasha, who was doing my hair, said, oh, is this something new you putting this out? I'm like, no, this is from Butterfly, but they never released it. So it's like a lot of those songs that to me are like my favorite little gems never got put out.
Now, some people like to say that Mariah couldn't sing anymore during this era, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, and I'm so tired of people saying this. And her voice changed over time like it does with every era, and it definitely had a raspy quality to it for sure. She still sounded fantastic as well. And we also have to remember that she has nodules on her vocal cords that she said she learned how to sing around. And vocal nodules are hard, rough, non-cancerous growths on your vocal cords. And these are something that she's had for her entire career. And basically she says some days, you know, it's a lot easier for her to belt, but she might not have the whistle register, and vice versa, and that it can be helped with, you know, taking care of her voice, you know, getting a lot of sleep, drinking tea, and things like that. But she basically has to take it day by day, and yeah, this is just something that's happened her entire career. And so I'm just really tired of people spreading this false narrative. Did you guys watch my All in SNL or any of the other performances that she did? It is something that is so tired, and I just figured that I would address it. To promote the album, Mariah would go on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Saturday Night Live. She would also perform at various award shows in other countries. She wasn't going to tour this album, but she obliged you to fan requests, and she would go on the Butterfly World Tour, which is going to be a third tour and her most extensive to date. And there would be 11 shows for this tour, 4 in Japan's largest stadium, Tokyo Dome, 1 in Taiwan, 5 in Australia, and 1 in the US, as part of her performance at the 50,000 capacity Aloha Stadium in Hawaii. And the show sold well, and the tour was a critical and commercial success. Both fans and critics would praise the show, and she would film a concert video called Around the World, and it was a compilation DVD which had parts of her shows in Japan, Australia, and Hawaii. Mariah would also have her own record label called Crave Records at this time, and so it would be founded in February 1997, and it was shut down in July 1998. Group sign included DJ Company, Allure, would have a self-titled debut album, having hit singles such as Head Over Heels, All Cried Out, and Last Chance. And it would also have a quartet, 7 Mile, who would also release a self-titled album. And so basically regarding the label, this is something that Mariah was really excited about and really hands-on in, you know, definitely writing some songs and appearing in videos and things like that. So essentially she said once Tommy figured out the marriage wasn't going to work, he shut down the label. So that's what happened there, which is really unfortunate because you could tell something that she was really passionate about, and it could have been really successful for this group had she been able to see it to fruition. Also, she dated Derek Jeter during this time, and a lot of songs on the album are about him. Regarding that, she says, let's be honest, as an artist, I am the queen of taking one morsel and making many meals from it. I milked and mined my limited time with DJ for much more than it was worth. My 6th studio album, Butterfly, was released into the world and has since sold more than 10 million copies. Though our relationship was just a moment in my timeline, Derek served a very high purpose in my life. He was a catalyst I needed to get out from under Tommy's crippling control and get in touch with my sensuality, and the intimacy of our shared racial experience was major. To connect with a healthy family who looked like mine was inspiring. He was in the right place at the right time, and he was there for the right purpose. DJ was the love in my life, not of my life. It was the idea rather of him rather than the reality of him. I was so magnetic. In the end, I'll chalk up our ending to the fact that we couldn't live up to each other's fantasies. One can never compete with the fantasy. You just can't. It's like Marilyn used to say, they go to bed with Marilyn Monroe and they wake up in orange. Also, something I wanted to say really quickly is I feel like she should have collaborated with Janet Jackson during this time. The color palettes were very similar. I feel like they could have jumped on each other's songs, and you know, it would have been amazing. Imagine Janet on Baby Doll, imagine Mariah on a song like I Get Lonely, or they could have done their own song together. And I just feel like it was a missed opportunity. Yeah, I know they were supposed to collab, it didn't come to fruition, but I really feel like it should have happened during this era. And I made a whole TikTok about it, so if you want to like kind of have more detail into why I think that and you know how things will line up, then definitely check that out as well. But I love Janet, and I definitely had to mention that as well. She also did a wonderful Patti LaBelle tribute singing If Only You Knew and Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It is gorgeous. If you haven't seen it yet, I will link it below. Also during this time, she would be in the first Divas Live, which was aired on April 14th, 1998, and this was filmed filmed at New York City's Beacon Theater, and it featured international music stars such as Aretha Franklin, Celine Dion, Gloria Estefan, Mariah, and Shania Twain, and Carole King was a special guest performance.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you guys if you preferred Butterfly or Daydream more, and this is something that often gets talked about in the fandom, and most people tend to go with Butterfly, but there are a lot of people who love Daydream as well. For me, I personally prefer Butterfly, but I'm going to be doing a poll by the time this video is out, so you can vote there. Also, you can talk about your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you think if one is like objectively better, but you have a preference, or like whatever it is. I'd really like to know your reasoning for which one you personally prefer, but I figured that I'd ask.
In order to get out of her contract with Sony, Mariah basically wins and she exchanged a deal with them, and so they came to an agreement for her to do a few more records essentially. And so basically they would have her do a compilation album called Number Ones, and she basically said that this is not going to be a greatest hits. It was just basically a thank you to the fans for making these records go number one. And so at the time it would include her 13 number one hits, and then she would also have 4 extra songs on there as well. In Japan it would include All I Want for Christmas Is You, which was her biggest selling single there. So she said that she wants certain records to be on the album that weren't necessarily hits, but the label was against that. Regarding the album, in the book she says, they wanted a greatest hits album too. I was resistant to this because it felt so premature, as if they were trying to sew me up with the 90s. Mariah would release a cover of Sweetheart by Rainy Davis with Jermaine Dupri for his debut album Life in 1472, which would later be included on the Number Ones album on September 7th, 1998. Following its radio release, eligibility for the US Billboard Hot 100 chart was changed to include non-commercial releases and airplay data from R&B stations. In the first week of the rule change on December 5th, 1998, it entered the bubbling under Hot 100 at number 25 and remained on the chart for 1 week internationally. It would peak in the top 20 of record charts in Germany, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. Critics commented on Carey's vocal performance and Dupri's rapping, many praising Carey's restrained singing style. Writing for the Popular Music and Society Journal, Vincent Stevens thought this helped make Sweetheart one of her best R&B songs. According to Ron Rollins of the Dayton Daily News, it demonstrates her confidence in her vocal abilities. Other reviewers complimented on how well Dupri's rapping complemented Carey's singing, and some argued that the song was more showcase for Carey than Dupri. When You Believe with Whitney Houston would be the lead single for the album, and it was released on November 2nd, 1998. And it's a song from The Prince of Egypt, written by Stephen Schwartz, and a pop version of it was also done by Babyface as well. And it'd also be the lead single for Whitney's album, My Love Is Your Love.
There can be miracles when you believe.
When You Believe would peak at number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, the top 2 in Norway, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland, and the top 5 in Belgium, France, Iceland, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. When You Believe was awarded the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the 71st annual ceremony on March 21st, 1999, and they would also perform the song at the ceremony as well. They'd also perform it on Oprah as well, and it won an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Duo or Group. They would also be nominated at the Grammys for Best Pop Collaboration with Vocals. When You Believe was generally well received by critics, who favorably described the track as epic, powerful, beautiful, stunning, bombastic, and a devout duet. Chuck Taylor Billboard wrote, "The Babyface Stamp track is indeed lovely, offering an instantly accessible chorus and a squeaky message of all things are possible when you believe in your dreams." He added, "The genuine story in this track is the return of Houston, who sounds fantastic, as clear and confident as ever." Another editor, Paul Verna, stated that it is a high-powered duet and later highlighted the song while reviewing Houston's album. AllMusic called it unexpected and unexpectedly dull. David Brown complained it had so much chat, Maple Trees will be jealous, particularly dismissing the song's religious aspect as insipid and its inspirational message as forced and generic. Mariah said she wished that she had a hand in writing the song, and this is something that I definitely agree with. I think it's a good song overall. I can really appreciate both of them on the track, and I feel like it complements their voices quite well, right? But I remember whenever I heard that they did a song together, and I was like, of course it went number one, right? It's Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston. And then whenever I found out it was 15, I was kind of shocked at that. But yeah, I definitely think if she would have had a hand on the writing, it definitely would have helped. I don't know why they wouldn't have asked her beforehand. She already had like 13 number one hits at that point. I definitely think it would have been a better song, and it would have aged better, but I appreciate it for what it is, and I really wish that they would have done an original song together. Basically, their duet was a huge deal because, like I was talking about earlier, they were always compared, and a lot of people thought that they had a rivalry against each other and things like that. And so basically, whenever they came to do the song, it was something that was a huge cultural moment as well, and they ended up becoming friends, and I just really appreciated their performances of the songs at this time as well. And then, of course, you know, they did some interviews together on Oprah's and things like that, and then they also had that moment at the VMAs whenever they ripped the dress, which was like an iconic moment as well.
Nice dress. Yeah. You look pretty good too. You do. That's a one of a kind, huh? It looks kind of familiar. That's what they told me. Yeah, they told me mine was too, but you know what? What, baby? Fortunately, I come prepared for situations like this. Try it on me! All right. Because I could do it better. Oh! You look good. Now, all right, now that's a page turner.
No, you look good. You look very good. Hi, darling. How are you? Love you too. How you doing?
I'm good.
You're
Oh,
good?
we're draping all over the microphone. All right. None of this matters. None of this matters. Let's get to the presenters.
And yeah, they were great friends. They really respected each other's talent and as people. And so I wanted to say, stop pitting them against each other. I'm so tired of people trying to hate on one to uplift the other. That's not right no matter which way it goes, and I'm gonna call it out whenever I see it. They can both coexist. Two of the best singers of all time in my personal opinion. And I say whenever people can do that because I feel like they were both incredibly influential. Like there's so many singers who would not be doing what they are if it wasn't for these two women. And so it just really irritates me how people constantly put them against each other. It's one thing to have a preference, it's fine, but just be respectful about it. And it's one thing to say, oh, I prefer this person's music or whatever, because that is more subjective at the end of the day, but there's no need to try to hate on one to uplift the other. A cover of Brenda K. Starr's song I Still Believe would be released as the second single in the US on February 8th, 1999. In the UK, the track was released as 2 CD singles and a cassette on March 29th, 1999, and would peak at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. On the radio, the song would reach top 10 in multiple charts, the adult contemporary number 8, the hot R&B hip hop songs number 3, and the rhythmic chart number 8, and number 21 on the mainstream top 40. It was certified platinum by the RIAA, and it was ranked number 36 on the Billboard Year and Hot 100 Singles of 1999. It reached number 16 in the UK. It reached top 40 in Belgium, France, New Zealand, and Switzerland. She was mostly met with positive reviews from critics, and she did this as a tribute to Brenda K. Starr, who she was a background singer for. The music video is also an homage to Marilyn Monroe. I believe I found this clip where she basically said that the guy who like designed her dresses like came on and fitted her on and on the set. Mariah is a huge fan of Marilyn Monroe, and in her book about her, she says, I read a lot about Marilyn Monroe, conspiracy theories about her death, and about her upbringing. The more I read, the more I connected with her and understood why I was drawn to her. She had a very difficult childhood, moving from one foster home to another. That was close to my story, being uprooted and unprotected, feeling like I was an outsider. I intimately understood her struggles with poverty and family. Ultimately, what I loved about Marilyn was her ability to come from nothing to belong to no one and evolve into a huge icon. I latched onto that. I believed in that. She also bought her white baby grand piano as well, and her daughter is named Monroe after Marilyn. I wanted to take a second to appreciate one of the remixes for the song, so I really appreciate whenever she did I Still Believe and Pure Imagination with Crazy Bone and DeBrat. This is probably one of my favorite Mariah songs, one of my favorite Mariah remixes, and I just really appreciate what everyone contributed. Like the fact that she thought to combine those two songs together just really shows how talented that she is. I wanted to take a second to appreciate this one in particular because it is just gorgeous from top to bottom. If you haven't heard it already, you should definitely check it out, of course. And I can just always really appreciate her remixes because of the artistic expression and everything. I also really do love the music video for this as well. A cover of Diana Ross's Do You Know Where You're Going To would be issued as a promotional single in Brazil and parts of Europe. The song performed weekly throughout the world, didn't really chart in any major music market. In December of 1999, Columbia released the video DVD number 1, which contained music videos and recordings of live performances for the number 1 singles featured on number 1s, as well as Heartbreaker, which had gone to number 1 during that time. Number 1s would be released on November 17th, 1998, and it would peak at number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart, and it would reach number 1 in Japan, Greece, and Malaysia, and top 10 throughout most major worldwide music markets, and it was certified 5 times platinum by the RIAA and double platinum by the IFPI. The album reported sales in Japan at 3,250,000 copies in the first 3 months and remains the best-selling album of all time in Japan by a non-Asian artist. As of 2021, the album has sold over 15 million copies worldwide. The album will receive mixed reviews from critics, getting 4 out of 5 stars from Heather Phares of AllMusic. Phares complimented the album's content, feeling the song selection was too commercial but very strong. Additionally, Phares wrote, her career has been an extraordinary succession of number 1s and record-breaking firsts in the music world. Her entire album catalog has received RIAA multi-platinum status. Phares also commented on the accompanying DVD, writing, interviews and interactive menus make number 1s a better than average DVD video collection, and one that will doubtlessly please Carey's legions of fans. The album received a scathing review from Britain's Enemy magazine with its critic writing, I fear Mariah Carey, superficially she might seem like a purveyor of saccharine village like Hero, but that's bullshit. You don't sell 90 million records unless you reserve that fluffy bunny stuff for your sucker fans. You gotta be cool-eyed, hard-boiled, and have balls of steel. She'll do whatever it takes, and her most fiendish weapon is the duet. If the more market needs servicing, she'll do it with Luther or Whitney. If her contemporary edge needs sharpening, she'll hang with the Wu-Tang Clan. If you're big in the R&B charts like Brian McKnight, she'll be in there like a heat-singing parasite. She don't give a fuck. She destroys competition by sucking them dry and spitting them out. Mariah Carey is she who must be bought at all costs. Be very afraid. So essentially, after writing for Butterfly, she would start working on the soundtrack for All That Glitters, but it was delayed and she had Heartbreaker, so she decided to do Rainbow instead. And essentially, this is something that she recorded in 3 months because she was just trying to get out of her contract with Sony at the time, and it didn't count the Christmas album, so she just rushed to get this one done. And Walter would not be on this album at all due to the fact that they had a falling out. Essentially, during the Butterfly era, there was this one interview that I watched, and she said something about they had an argument then, and something about like, oh, your friends tell secrets. And some people think maybe he told Tommy about Derek, so that could be part of it. Maybe it was just something else about like the musical direction. Also, Walter was very loyal to Tommy as well, so she probably felt betrayed by him in that respect. And then there's one story people think that Walter was involved in. So in her book she says, one evening I was working with two men I had a significant creative and professional relationship with, whose duty it was to have mob-like loyalty to Tommy. These three men, to whose wealth and prominence I had contributed considerably, and I were sitting in the kitchen about to have a meal break. Even though we were all friends sitting around the table facing a large rustic fireplace with the now sadly ironic phrase storybook manor etched in the namestone mantle, I named it that, desperately believing I could wish and will my nightmare into a fairy tale. The atmosphere was anything but warm. It was cold, quiet, and pungent with pain and conflict. Evidence to all that a dynamic in me had shifted. I think it embarrassed Tommy that he had lost control and lost his woman in front of his boys. Embarrassment enraged him. He began an awkward and creepy little rant about the beautiful car he had just given me and our fabulous estate, which I designed and half financed, and how in spite of all of it, I wanted to leave him. I was sitting still looking down at the table when Tommy walked over and picked up the butter knife from the place setting in front of me, pressed the flat side of it against my right cheek. Every muscle in my face clenched, my entire body locked in place, my lungs stiffened. Tommy held the knife there. His boys watched and didn't say a word. After what seemed like forever, he slowly dragged the thin, cool strip of metal down my burning face. I was searing with rage from the excruciating humiliation of his terrifying, cowardly performance in my kitchen in front of my colleagues. So yeah, a lot of people think that he was one of the people in that story, and that's definitely something that makes sense. And even Mariah was asked about this, I believe, in a Rolling Stone interview that she did, and she basically was like, hey, you might not be far off, but she was like, I really can't say just in order to protect myself. So yeah, we definitely think that he was part of that story. But yeah, it's really unfortunate that that happened to her overall, I will say. And also she basically said that she outgrew his adult contemporary style, and basically that he was kind of like a more pop producer. And you know, she basically really enjoyed the work that they did together. She would always try to steer him more R&B, but like I said, he was basically more pop. And so she wanted to go more R&B, had the hip hop incorporated more, so she started working with other producers as well. And so yeah, that's basically why they had a falling out and why they haven't worked together since. And yes, I know that there's going to be a song, Lead the Way, on the Glitter album. And so essentially, I believe that was done during Butterfly Time, and then she just put it on the album and stuff like that, and that's why he has a credit on there, basically. And so it's really important to note that she didn't write lyrics with Walter, and she said this before. A lot of times, you know, they would come up with the music together, and she would kind of hum them chord progressions, and then he would find where to go and kind of riff off of that, and then she would go and write the lyrics herself. And nowadays, a lot of the time, he is bashing her and things like that and trying to take more credit than he actually deserves.
But you know, the thing is like, whoever's if someone's a great piano player, I can write with them. Because what I do is I hear the chords in my head, and the quicker they are on the keyboards at hearing what I'm hearing in my head, then the better we'll get along as writers. Because then I take it and do the lyrics, you know, by myself. Mm-hmm. But what Kenny Babyface is someone who I would write lyrics with also. Like a lot of times, the people who are the best, like piano, like Walter and I don't write lyrics together. That's not what we do. It'd be cool if I could find someone who I could also collaborate, you know, on the lyrics with, because I really don't do that very much. The reason that I usually do collaborate on the music is because the melodies and the ideas that come into my mind, I hear the chords. And so I have to explain to the person, if they're not playing the chord right, I have to like sing the chord to them. And a guy said to me the other day, he's like, no one ever sang out a chord to me and told me what to play. I'm like, that's how I do it, because by the time I come up with playing the chord, I lose the idea that I had, because I'm not a good piano player. That's why I like collaborating with someone that's a really good player. But lyrics, I really don't have someone that I found that I really, really enjoy writing lyrics with.
On this album, she would collaborate with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and they would produce the bulk of the album. She would also work with David Foster and Diane Warren, Demiza, Candy Buress, and other writers and producers as well.
What I tried to do with this album is incorporate the ballads with the songs that are more, you know, the up-tempo records, and use interludes to kind of segue between them so that you wouldn't feel this jolting thing, you know. So I mean, I told you about the cover of Against All Odds. It's pretty hard to go from a record with Missy Elliott and Brat, that's a loop of a Snoop Dogg record, right, to Against All Odds. But because working with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who are really genius at figuring out interludes, and we really had a great musical partnership, we kind of figured out how to make these transitional pieces that would make the album work. And I think sequencing this album was really important, and I tried to kind of tell a story
in the sequencing and make it all kind of make sense.
Yeah, I hope everybody enjoys Rainbow because it's a symbol of hope for the new millennium. The rainbow is like a beautiful symbol of hope, and to me, I hope that the world, like, instead of everybody trying to bring each other down, all the different races, will support each other and be in harmony like a rainbow. So that's one of the reasons we named the album.
The reason he wanted it to be so vibrant, and I guess maybe that's kind of what you were referring to with the artwork and stuff like that, is because when we met, I'd never met him before. I've been a huge admirer of his work, and I think he's a genius. And he just saw something, and he said that there was like this light and happiness about me that he felt he hadn't, you know, seen before, and he wanted to emphasize that. And he felt that the painting the rainbow on me, which they did, which was a unique experience, and just showing that kind of vibrant, you know, those vibrant colors, and that he felt like I was exuding something that he wanted to show. So it wasn't about, it's kind of like, the photos are kind of kitsch and done with a sense of humor, but it's also because, you know, I took them at a time in my life when I was happy. And if you'll notice, it's the first album cover I'm ever smiling on, and I'm ever not hiding half of my face. So that's an improvement, you know, for me.
Heartbreaker featuring Jay-Z would be released on August 23rd, 1999 as a lead single from the album, and the track would use a sample from Attack of the Name Game recorded by Stacey Lattisaw. Would become her 14th #1 single in the US, spending 2 weeks at the top of the charts, and it would finish at number 35 on the Billboard year-end of 1999. It would go #1 in Canada and New Zealand on their singles charts, and it was a top 5 single in Croatia, France, Poland, Spain, and the UK. The music video was one of the most expensive ones ever made, costing $2.5 million. I think that it's a fun music video, something that was more girly at the time as well. It really showed off her personality. Heartbreaker would receive mixed reviews from music critics. A lot of them felt like it was something that was redundant essentially, and they said that it sounded too much like fantasy. Mariah herself said it sounded a lot more like Dream Lover in terms of the melody, and basically like, oh, I wrote all these songs, so of course they're going to sound similar. Something interesting is that she said the label didn't believe that Heartbreaker was a hit, and I'm glad she was able to convince them to release it. And in the US, Columbia would release Thank God I Found You featuring Joe and 98 Degrees to radio stations as the second single from the album in November 1999, and a physical single would later be released on January 25th, 2000 in the US and on February 28th, 2000 in the UK. And this would end up being her 15th #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and it would later be certified gold by the RIAA, and it would have a peak of #2 in Canada. It reached the top 10 in Spain, Poland, and the UK, and peaked within the top 30 in Australia, Belgium, Wallonia, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. Thank God I Found You got mixed reviews from critics. Some thought that it was a great album closer, some people thought that it was forgettable. She would also receive a Grammy nomination for Best Collaboration with Vocals for the song. She would also do a remix of the song, going in and re-singing the vocals and having Joe and Nas on there as well, and incorporating Make It Last Forever by Keith Sweat into the song. There were a few lawsuits for the song. Most of them were thrown out. One of them was reinstated in 2004, and it was settled out of court in 2006.
Okay, so I forgot to mention this, but she did do a collaboration with Jay-Z for his album, and the song was called Things That You Do, and it didn't really perform well because it wasn't really promoted that well, and so the song would debut at #20 on the US Billboard, bubbling under R&B hip-hop singles chart.
The cover of Phil Collins' song Against the Odds was released as the 3rd single from the album, and it wasn't released as a commercial or radio single in the United States. The song peaked at #2 in Norway and Poland while reaching the top 20 in multiple European countries. She would also re-release the song with Westlife as the 1st single from the band's 2nd album, Coast to Coast, and the song would be released on September 15, 2000. The song debuted at #1 in the UK, selling 112,000 copies, and it remained at #1 in its 2nd week, selling a further 78,500 copies, and the song became Carey's 2nd to top the UK singles chart and Westlife's 6th consecutive #1. The song would also go #1 for 2 weeks in Scotland and 3 in Ireland. It peaked at #3 on the continental charts and European Hot 100 singles. Crybaby featuring Snoop Dogg would be released on April 17, 2000 as a double A-side with Can't Take That Away, and it would be the 4th single for the album. And it's built around a sample of a 1988 song, Piece of My Love, originally performed by Guy. The song was able to peak at #28 on the charts. Can't Take That Away, Mariah's theme, is a ballad that she wrote with Diane Warren, and it was produced by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And this is a song that's in the vein of a song like Here, for example. It wasn't successful due to the fact that it had a limited release and also a conflict with her label as well. So she wanted this to be a single as it was something that was more personal in terms of lyric, and Columbia disagreed with that. Like, they needed something that was more upbeat and urban. And so basically this led to a public feud with the label, and she would be posting messages on her website telling fans, you know, what was happening with it online. And she also asked them to request it on radio as well. And one of the messages left on her page read, basically, a lot of you know the political situation in my professional career is not positive. It's been really, really hard. I don't even know if this message is going to get to you because I don't know if they want you to hear this. I'm getting a lot of negative feedback from certain corporate people, but I am not willing to give up. And so basically after this, they took down all the messages from her site and they said, okay, we will release this as a single. And she was like, all right. And basically they screwed her over with this because it was only allowed a very limited and low promotion release, not allowing the song to chart on the official US charts and making international charting very hard and unlikely. And it was well received by critics who complimented the lyrical content as well as her vocal performance. Regarding the song, she says, the three of us worked all the way through, can't take that away, Mariah's theme, which I brought to Diane Warren, who plucked it out on the piano as I sang the lyrics and melody to the first verse. We wrote the second verse together. The song is actually about the professional and personal situation I was going through. Since I was a child, I had often had to turn to the light in me that shines brightly just to get through, just to survive. So that was a song about many things, but when I wrote it, I was thinking about all that was going on at the time, about Tommy, and about the many years I had spent under his control. That was my theme. They can try, but they can't take that away from me. No, no, no. The song didn't do anything on the charts because the label barely promoted it, and this marked the beginning of their sabotage campaign. It mattered for the fans, it mattered for the people who needed to hear it, and it matters for me. To this day, I still listen to it every once in a while. I still need it. Rainbow was released on November 2nd, 1999, and the album would debut at number 2 on the US Billboard 200 charts with first week sales of 323,000, and it became her first studio album since Merry Christmas to not reach the top spot in the US. Its first week, it was blocked from the top spot by Rage Against the Machine's The Battle of Los Angeles. Its second week, the album stayed at number 2, selling an additional 228,000 copies, blocked from the top spot by Faith Hill's Breathe. And its 8th week, Rainbow experienced its highest weekly sales during the Christmas week of 1999, selling 369,000 copies while placing at number 9. In a month, Rainbow was certified triple platinum by the RIAA. The album peaked at number 1 in France and Greece and charted within the top 5 positions in Australia, Austria, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Japan, and Switzerland. Globally, Rainbow sold an estimated 8 million copies, and it would receive mixed reviews from critics. And Entertainment Weekly, it said, what began on Butterfly as a departure ends up on Rainbow a progression, perhaps the first compelling proof of Carey's true colors as an artist. Rolling Stone viewed it as a genuine R&B and hip-hop album, a sterling chronicle of the state of accessible hip-hop balladeering at the close of 1999. Aside from calling some of the ballads banal, Berger concluded his review that Rainbow is at its best and Carey at her most comfortable. When urban hip-hop stylings and faux R&B coexist in smooth middle-of-the-road harmony, Alyssa Garner from the Los Angeles Times wrote in her review, exhibiting an emotional authority to match her technical prowess, Carey gives us a vision of love that's dynamic without being ostentatious. Amelin from Vibe was less impressed by the album, particularly the songs in which Carey sings over hip-hop samples or alongside guest rappers, deeming it a commonplace formula, pairing a singing thrush with a rhyming thug. In terms of fan favorites, I would definitely say Heartbreaker with Jay-Z and also the remix as well. And so I'd also say Against All Odds. And I'd also say Petals. This is definitely one of her most personal songs. And she's talking about a few different people on this track, and in interviews whenever they asked her back then, she couldn't really say who it was. People think that she's talking about Tommy, which definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, she's even saying, I gravitated towards a patriarch so young predictably. And then she's also talking about the entire knife thing, and we know that Tommy did that as well, and that was definitely a shocking line to listen to in the song. And that was something I was mentioning earlier as well. And then people also think that she could be talking about Tommy's kids, possibly, about her siblings as well. And so yeah, it's a very, very personal song for her and just really raw and emotional as well. And regarding this in her book, she says, another important song on Rainbow was Petals. It was and still is a painful piece for me. It's about my life, my family, my growth. It was both a thank you and a farewell to the toxic influences in my life. In a way, Petals told part of my life story through snapshots of the formative relationships that touched and changed me. For this song, I wanted to offer forgiveness and to imagine another possible life in the future, one with less hurt and more healing. So I wrote the song to release some of the pain. But there are still times when the hurt chokes me and I cannot sing the song.
Okay, so I realized I forgot to share my thoughts on this album. So this is actually one of my favorite Mariah albums, and I just think that it's really great front to back. I really like the sequencing on here, has some of my favorite Mariah songs. I love Can't Take That Away, the lyrics, the sentiment, all of it, definitely one of my favorite Mariah songs of all time. Heartbreaker remix is really, really great. I really appreciate how different that it is from the original. I really like the contributions from Missy and Debrat, of course, and I really like the original Heartbreaker as well. I really love Against All Odds. I love Thank God I Found You. And Ex-Girlfriend, I feel like is something that is pretty underrated. Like, people don't really give that one enough appreciation, so I really do go up for this album quite a lot. And I definitely would consider myself, you know, a Rainbow apologist. I really do love this album. Also, I really liked her looks during this era. Like, I feel like this era is very underrated, and I do think that it is one of her best eras. And so I just really love how colorful that this was as well. And I also really like the blonde hair, I like the hair clips. Like, this is just an excellent era overall. So I feel like the album always is very underrated, and so is the era. So I wanted to show a little bit more appreciation for Rainbow. And if you guys guys love the album, let me know down below in the comments.
I wanted to take a second to talk about the cutoff jeans that she would be wearing in the Heartbreaker music video and that she wore all the way throughout this era. She basically said that it's something that her and her stylist came up with and she never really got credited for it. And so I thought that that was something that was really cool overall, and I feel like she never really gets enough credit for her fashion, so I wanted to take a second to give her credit for that. And also the butterfly top that she wore, I thought that that was pretty cool as well. In order to promote the album, she did a few different performances. So before the album was released, she went on Pavarotti and Friends for Guatemala and Kosovo, performing My All In Hero alongside Luciano Pavarotti in a live duet. And the concert benefit was filmed live in Margiano, Italy during the summer of 1999 and was released for sale on September 21st, with funds being donated to relief efforts for natural disasters in Guatemala and Kosovo. And so she would have her own special on Fox Broadcast Recording Company titled the Mariah Carey Homecoming Special. And this was a mini concert that was filmed at her old high school and middle school as well in Huntington, New York. And the special would air on December 21st, 1999. She would also perform at the MTV EMAs. She would also go on Oprah, Top of the Pops, The Today Show, American Music Awards, and other programs and awards as well. She would go on the Rainbow World Tour, which included 19 shows, 6 in Europe, 4 in Asia, 8 in the US, and 1 in Canada. Sales for this were strong. The entire US leg sold out in a matter of days, and the Asian and European leg was also very successful as well. She got mixed reviews for this. Some critics and fans felt like she had a tired and hoarse voice, some loved the wardrobe, and there was a lot of people who really appreciated it as well. Something that's really interesting to me too is one of my Twitter mutuals, RJ, told me that they only shipped like a certain amount of copies of Rainbow basically, and in some stores it was really hard to find and like they kind of hid in there, something like that. And she was getting a lot of hate at this time due to the divorce and everything, and basically he said he would like call in on radio stations to like ask and request songs, and they say like, no, we're not playing that, and then they would be saying derogatory things about her as well. And he also told me that Tommy Mottola owned a stake in iHeartRadio music stations like Clear Channel, something like that. And I'm sure a lot of you watching this know exactly what happened with Glitter and his involvement in that as well. So it really wouldn't surprise me if he had any involvement in this. He was already following her around during the marriage, and I'm pretty sure that he was following her around after as well. And so that's really unfortunate. So I hate that that happened. And I also really think that it's unfortunate how the singles were rolled out for this album, and it just deserves so much better. I feel like it definitely would have debuted at #1 if they didn't mess up the singles rollout so badly on purpose. But also date Luis Miguel during this time. Regarding him in her book, she says, Luis didn't hold back in his material displays of adoration. Once he filled an entire private jet with red roses to surprise me. His dramatic romantic gestures spoke to the eternally 12 girl in me because they really were like something you saw in the movies. It was all grand and exciting, but it was far from perfect. For one thing, our relationship was characterized by culture clash. Though we were both young and successful, he was a lot stodgier than me. Our friends were total opposites. His were more conservative, serious, and uptight and boring, while I'd have Brad, Todd, Trey, and whoever popping all around. What was more difficult were the cultural gaps between us when it came to race. He would always insist that he didn't see me as black. We'd have these arguments and I'd explain, no, when your dad is black, it makes you black. So you're going to have to accept that about me. But in his mind, if I didn't look black, I wasn't. For him, it was simply skin deep. It was too difficult to explain that for Americans, it's much more complicated. I think for him, easier was better. Though I made an effervescent couple, it's always hard to live and love in the limelight. He may have been the Elvis of the Spanish-speaking world, but when it came to the United States, no offense, but for the most part, I was the star of the show. He'd been through a lot and lost his mother at a very young age. From what I've been told, his father was very difficult and controlling. I tried my best to support him emotionally, but I was going through my own shit, and it got to a point where I could no longer deal with it. We were not helping each other heal. At his best, Luis was generous, spontaneous, and passionate. But at his worst, he was erratic and anxious and had a dark cloud hanging over his head. After 3 years, I knew it was time for us to part ways. We had a good run, and I still have fond memories, but ultimately, he wasn't the one. She would also return in 2000 for Divas Live, once again paying tribute to Diana Ross. Mariah would write Where Are You Christmas for the soundtrack of the movie How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and so she originally recorded the song, but because of a legal case with Tommy, it couldn't be released, so she had Faith Hill record and release it. So her rendition would be released on December 11, 2000. Where Are You Christmas peaked at #10 on the Billboard Adult Contemporary chart in January 2001, becoming Hill's 5th top 10 single at that format, and it also experienced crossover success at radio. She gained #26 on the Hot Country Songs chart, at #40 on the Adult Pop Songs chart, in addition to reaching a peak position of #65 on the Billboard Hot 100. In 2013, Where Are You Christmas peaked at #15 on the seasonal Holiday 100 charts. The song never entered on the Canadian Hot 100, but it did reach a peak position of 38 on the Hot Canadian Digital Songs component in 2018. Basically, Mariah said that she found the demo and she's excited but hesitant to release it. And if you want to know about more songs that she wrote for other artists, there's a whole thread on Twitter, and I will link that down below in the description because there's a lot that I just simply didn't mention. Mariah would receive Billboard's Artist of the Decade Award in 1999, and I'm gonna put my favorite part of the speech right here.
I am not Cinderella. My life has not been a fairy tale. Forget the image, forget the ensembles, forget the rumors, forget the short skirts, big hair, whatever. I owe this to the fans, and I will never forget you. So I want to accept this award on behalf of all of you. You've come a long way, and I feel like I'm just getting started. Because as an artist, and most importantly, as a person, I am genuinely happy and finally free to be who I really am. Thank you.
She would also receive the World Music Award for Best-Selling Pop Female Artist of the Millennium.
Also, something that I can't believe I forgot to note is that Mariah would be the third and first female recipient of the American Music Award of Achievements, and this is something that you would get for huge success in music, basically, and she really dominated the 90s, so of course she would get this right, and Olivia Newton-John presented this to her, and she's the first artist to win it twice, because she would get it again due to the success of Touch My Body, and, you know, she would have 18 #1 singles at that point, and so that's something that's really cool, and I figured that I had to edit that in really quickly. Also, I thought that her look for this event was cool.
And she was the best-selling female artist of the 1990s, and she would also have a #1 hit every single year of the 90s. She would also have her acting debut in The Bachelor, just having a cameo role. And in 2013, Billboard retrospectively named Carey the Hot 100 Artist of the 1990s based on chart performance of her singles. I want to talk about why Mariah Carey dominated the 90s. #1, she has a talent to back it up as a singer, as a songwriter, and as a producer, first and foremost. We will get into that a little bit later, trust me. Second, she has the catalog to back it up. Really strong albums across the discography. And she has tangible hits with a record like Fantasy, Once We Dated, Dream Lover, just so many big songs to her name as well. She had a lot of songs that people could really relate to, like Make It Happen, like Hero, like Can't Take It Away, and I feel like a lot of people just really enjoyed her music as well. I think that she had a great label backing her. For the most part, I think that they marketed her pretty well, and you know, she was really able to get some great opportunities, and she was known as a vocalist first and foremost, and so I think that that's something that's really important as well. Also, I feel like a reason that she stood out is, of course, she has influences like everybody does, right? But you listen to her music and she's not blatantly ripping them off. Like, of course, she's inspired by people, but you can tell that she really took that and had her own style, and she was very unique in that way. And so I think when you have a voice like her, I think when you have a pen like her, I think when you can produce like she does, it's no wonder why she was on top for so long, why she still has longevity. So first of all, she is one of the best singers to ever do it. I mean, you just have the pure tone, you have the range, which is very impressive. Of course, we have the amazing whistle notes that we talk about all the time, but her low range is really impressive, and she shows that off whenever she did a tribute to Stevie Wonder doing You and I, which is gorgeous as well. And I feel like people don't really talk about it that much, and her technique is also incredible as well, and I feel like that is something that is very important. Like, she just makes it look so effortless whenever she's singing. I think that she is the best musicality of any artist out there, and I just think that she's really brilliant and creative with all the riffs and runs that she's doing. She's very vocally talented. Yes, we know that she learned a lot from her mom, of course, but she definitely took that and put her own spin onto it. And so yeah, there's a reason why whenever you read a lot of lists, she's going to be high up there, and she should. She's influenced so many singers, like we talked about, from a Beyonce to a Ariana Grande to a Christina Aguilera. Like, so many singers would not be doing what they're doing if it wasn't for Mariah. So I just really appreciate her voice, of course, and I feel like I learned a lot about singing from her, and you know, I think sound right and techniques and stuff like that in certain terms as well. I really love the way that she layers her vocals with the background vocals, with the lead vocal, with the harmony, all that, and I feel like she's the best at doing that, and nobody really fills out a song like she does, as people have said time and time again. So I feel like as a singer alone, she is just 1 in a billion, of course, and I'm so tired of people saying, oh, she can't sing anymore and blah blah blah. Life happens, your voice changes, nobody's gonna sound exactly how they sound whenever they first started, but Mariah still sounds great. And like I mentioned, she does have nodules on her vocal cords, so anybody dissing Mariah and saying like, oh, she can't sing anymore, you don't know anything about music. Like, I'm so serious. Do not even try dragging me in the comments, because I will delete all of them. Like, I do not play about that. Like, I'm so tired of people saying that. Also, I feel like Mariah is a musical genius, and I don't feel like you need to have classical training to be considered such. You know, Paul McCartney learned how to play piano by himself because he couldn't get with lessons. Aretha Franklin learned by ear. Aretha and Whitney learned how to sing in church, and those are some of the best musicians of all time. And I really think that Mariah's ear for melody and just the way that she can write a song and sing is truly brilliant, and I feel like she's very, very gifted, because she just doesn't get enough appreciation for everything that she can do. And I have a theory that I feel like some people think that Mariah is given too much with everything that she's achieved, so I think people really try to find ways to belittle her in whatever way, and I think that that's ridiculous. I think people can't fathom that one person is that talented and has accomplished that much, and it's time to give her flowers. And then she's definitely one of the best songwriters of all time as well. You know, you can talk about the second verse on Fantasy, for example. You can talk about a record like Outside, which is just amazing, especially like the ending of that song. Like, the writing on there is some of her best. We also have a record like Looking In, Can't Take That Away. Again, the fact that she wrote Alone in Love at 14 is very impressive. I also really like the songwriting on her album Memoirs of an Imperfect Angel, and I feel like it's just something that only she could pull off. A lot of people try to write like corny or funny lyrics like she does, and they can't make it work because of her delivery. Just because of her sheer confidence, she makes it work, and so I really appreciate that about her as a songwriter. Of course, I feel like she has amazing vocabulary, and you're always learning so much throughout her songs. She is such a smart songwriter who has so many hits to her name. And as I said for the billionth time, she does not get the credit as a songwriter that she deserves. And she is just truly brilliant and one of the best songwriters to ever do it right. And she's also really gifted as a producer as well. And then you have to add in the directing, like I was talking about earlier, with Fantasy and Always Be My Baby. Like the fact that Fantasy was her directorial debut, I know I already said this, but it still blows my mind. And then Always Be My Baby, like that is already a classic in its own, and the video is just something else. So I definitely feel like Mariah Carey is a 1 in a billion talent. And like I said before, stop calling these new singers the next Mariah Carey. You are setting them up. A talent like Mariah is never going to happen again, just in terms of the vocals. And then you add in the songwriting and the producing and everything else that she can do. It's never gonna happen again. I'm so tired of people acting like Mariah can be replaced. She is very, very talented and she deserves all the praise that she gets. Another thing I think that helps is that she's young at heart. She knows how to use social media. I think that she's really great. She's funny on there and just interacting with people there. Like she really was made for social media. She is always going viral all the time, and rightfully so. She just gets it. And another thing is I feel like she really understands how to adapt with the times. And because of that, that's why she didn't get relegated to the 90s, because she knew when to move on from adult contemporary and, you know, get back more so into her R&B roots. And like we already went over, they definitely did whitewash her and everything, and that's something important to add. And then she knew when to incorporate hip-hop in her music. Like she literally saw it coming with a record like Dream Lover, and unfortunately it wasn't able to be how she exactly wanted it, but then she was able to, you know, with Fantasy Remix, have ODB on there and popularize the pop rap collab, which is huge. I feel like she knows how to adapt with the times and keep what makes her great, and she always pivots at the right time. Like what she did with a record like Caution needs to be studied. I feel like that's very underrated in her discography, and it deserves a lot more appreciation. And the collaboration with Ariana Grande and J Hud is literally what got me into her music. And you know, I always liked her before, but after listening to that, I was like, you know what, I actually am intrigued by Mariah. Like let me listen to her entire discography. So because of moves like that, she can appeal to so many different audiences. And there's so many people I meet on social media every day, and they're like, oh, I'm, you know, 20 whatever, and I love Mariah. And there's people who are 50 who love Mariah because she just understands it. She literally has something for everyone, and I feel like she's very underrated by that. And I just really appreciate how she can adapt with the time, just not lose her artistic identity as well. Another thing is I really love how she did eras, and you know, it was just something that was really fitting for the time. And you know, as people have said, a lot of times with the artist, you need reinvention. So she was already doing that with her sound, but she always did it with her look. And you know, all throughout the eras, it was always something that was current with the time, but it also like made sense for her. And like I said, she's really underrated for her fashion, and I definitely think that she deserves a lot more appreciation in regards to that as well. And so I think whenever you can just constantly reinvent yourself, not only with your sound, but with your look, that is just something that is a plus. She also really loves her fans, who are called the Lambily. And basically she said how that came about is that her and Trey Lorenz, which is one of her backup singers, basically like they heard this like older male singer saying like, oh, be a lamb and get me this. And so basically it was just kind of something that they adopted. And you know, whenever she was leaving messages for her fans on the website, then you know, she would say it, and they picked up on it and named themselves Lambs. And basically like, I think they were like the first fan base to do so. So that's basically where that originates from. But yeah, you can tell that she really appreciates her fans. I've talked to a lot of people who have met her, and they always say like how nice she is and all that kind of stuff. And she did this episode of MTV Cribs, and she had a room just dedicated to things that her fans gave her, and I will put the footage here.
I have books from my fans here. I keep everything I get, to the point where it annoys the people that have to pack my bags, because they're packing all these fan books and all these stuffed animals and all these things and pictures and stuff, because I do put them in the butterfly fan room, which is now a lot more full with stuff, and it's different than it was when we did the show. These helped me out in a time when I wasn't feeling quite so very happy.
It is nice to dedicate a room to your fans. Might want to go in there and remember that all these people care about you.
The originality of my fans is unparalleled. They make me happy. So we dedicate the butterfly room to them. They can come sleep over here.
I also literally saw this interview segment where she literally remembered fans and where they were from after she was showing pictures of them as well. She did Twitter Spaces for us as well. She just does so many things, and she's always saying like how much she's appreciated us all the way throughout the entire career, and I feel like this really shows all the way throughout her actions. Another thing I appreciate is her versatility. She can do a bunch of different records. So she can do pop, rock, R&B, jazz. She's also done some house records as well, and the hip hop records. Like there's so many different things that she's done, and there's so many genres that I'm missing out. So I appreciate not only that, but how she can take a cover and, you know, interpret it as her own. I also appreciate her remixes as well. Regarding them in a book, she says, in order to make the label happy, I had to deliver several versions of a single, including one that was up-tempo and simple, scrubs of all ad-libs and urban inflections. In order to make myself happy and make sure a song I like could work for the club kids who have always given me life, I set aside time to make remixes, sometimes several on one song. I often did complete rewrites and all new vocal tracks rather than recycling from the original, especially when I worked with David Morales. We would completely re-envision a song. We often worked late at night, and when I would steal a moment for myself, David would come to the studio and I'd tell him he could do whatever he wanted with the song. I'd have a couple splashes of wine and we would just go wherever the spirit took us. And what I appreciate about her remixes is how creative that they are. It's a completely different thing with re-singing the vocals, the instrumentation, and like I said, just the fact that she even thought to put I Still Believe in Pure Imagination together is something that is just really cool to me overall. And so her remixes are just something that always intrigued me because, you know, I didn't know that remixes were supposed to be completely different until I got into her. I was like, oh, this is what a true remix is. Another thing is I feel like she's hilarious and very smart and a lot deeper than she is given credit for. And so if you're not familiar with her, I definitely recommend reading her book and watching her interviews and things like that. But you know, she is just so funny and I definitely think that that helps a lot. I just think that she has a really great sense of humor as well. I wanted to address the diva image. Regarding that, Mariah says, there are things people are not aware of because this quote unquote diva thing is always what people see first. She said, yes, I play into it. And yes, part of that is real. I can't help it. Like, what do you do if you grew up with an opera singer for a mother who went to Juilliard and made her debut at Lincoln Center? There's just a certain amount that is going to emerge. So yes, it's just an affectation and sometimes it's purposely done and sometimes it's just like, you know, a response. Basically, she went through a lot during the glitter and charm bracelet era. I would highly recommend you read the book, or there's probably another video going into detail on it. I do not have the time today, just know that she was really going through it. And so in the end, those records underperformed to her standards, but it still did well overall. We Belong Together will go to #1 for 14 weeks, a smash hit, and Shake It Off would be at #2, being blocked by her when We Belong Together. Don't Forget About Us will go #1 for 2 weeks. And its first week of release, Emancipation of Mimi debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 with 404,000 copies sold, the highest first week sales in Carey's career. The Emancipation of Mimi was the best-selling album in the US in 2005 with nearly 5 million copies sold. As of October 2011, the Emancipation of Mimi has sold 10 million copies worldwide.
Okay, so I forgot to mention this, but she would win 3 Grammys for this album. She got Best Contemporary R&B Album, Best Female R&B Vocal Performance, and she would also get Best R&B Song for We Belong Together. And her wins weren't televised at the time, unfortunately, because the Grammys are racist and they weren't televising then. And so, yeah, she definitely should have swept because this was the album of that year, like a huge record, right? And We Belong Together was a respective song of that year. Even whenever Song of the Year, Record of the Year, like one of those was happening, the DJ started playing We Belong Together because they thought that it won, obviously. And yeah, even though she got 3 Grammys, she should have got way more, but she did get 3 Grammys for this album. So she would also perform at the ceremony as well, doing a mashup of We Belong Together and Fly Like a Bird. And this is one of the most like acclaimed performances of her entire career, basically one of her best performances. People post about it all the time. And I just wanted to say that this album right here, The Emancipation of Mimi, is literally the best comeback of all time. And people really thought that she was over after Glitter and Charm Bracelet. Like, me saying that she was going through it, that is something that can kind of feel like an understatement if you really know the context and everything behind it. Like I said, I don't have time to talk about it because that video would be like another hour or 2 hours long because there's so much. But yeah, after she went through that entire thing, come back the way that she did with We Belong Together being such a smash hit and with the album doing so well with fans and critics alike, you know, I think that that is something that is amazing overall. And also, this is definitely one of her best eras. Like, I really love the hair throughout this era. Like, she was just really glowing during this time. And so yeah, easily the best comeback of all time.
Touch My Body will go #1 for 2 weeks. Equals MC Square will debut at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart with opening week sales of 463,000. It also debuted at #1 in Canada and opened inside the top 5 in Australia, Switzerland, and the UK. Worldwide, the album has sold over 2.5 million copies. Obsessed would peak at #7 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. She would also have her twins Been Rockin' and Monroe in 2011. All Over Her Christmas Is You went #1 in 2019 and is doing so every year. As of now, it has 12 weeks at #1. She has 19 #1 hits and 28 top 10s. She has the most #1s for a solo artist, and she's only second to the Beatles, as well as a lot of other chart accomplishments. Mariah has 5 Grammys, 19 World Music Awards, 15 Billboard Music Awards. She received the Billboard Icon Award in 2019. She is a New York Times bestseller with her book, The Meaning of Mariah Carey. She's selected in the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2022. If you were interested in getting into her music, here's how I'd recommend doing it. So basically, I started off with her debut album, worked my way through chronologically, watched interviews in between, and I highly recommend doing it this way. That way you can see her growth as a singer, as a songwriter, as a producer. Also, so you can get the context of these songs as well, and I feel like that's really important as well. So that's really how I like doing it, and that's the main way I'd recommend it. But if you just wanted a few records to listen to, I will give you some recommendations. So if you want something close to the beginning of her career and you are really into R&B, soul, jazz, gospel, all that kind of stuff, I definitely say listen to Emotions. 90s R&B is your bag. I would say listen to Daydream. If you really love 2000s R&B, listen to The Emancipation of Mimi. If you want something more contemporary, listen to Caution. Also, I would love to interview Mariah. I have so many obscure questions that I would really love to ask her. So if anybody on her team sees this, I would love for that to be reality. Definitely, message me on Twitter or Instagram or anything like that. It's linked down below in the description. Alright, so that should be it. Hopefully I didn't mess anything up. If I did, then correct me down below in the comments. I really try to get just the most important aspects of her career and all these eras and things. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to get everything. There is so much to pack in just 10 years of her career, so I know that, of course, there's things that weren't included. Obviously, I'm a huge fan, so I know what things I didn't didn't include. But I really try my best to have like the main points of her career and also important background information as well. If I went into everything, I would literally be here forever. I definitely like to learn more facts about her that are really obscure if you can find it. Hopefully any of the interviews that I reference in this video don't get deleted or anything. If they are, hopefully I'm able to find a backup. Also, if you know about any of the interviews that I referenced that like I couldn't find, definitely leave them down below in the comments. If you can find any obscure interviews, I would really appreciate them. If there's any new information that comes out that is really important to add, then I will definitely add that down below in the pinned comment, or I have that in the description as well. Also, if you wanted to see more videos on Mariah, I will have a card on the screen right here to where you guys can go to. It'll also be at the end of this video and linked down below in the description. But that is going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a like down below. It helps you out a lot in YouTube algorithm. I very much appreciate it. You can subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. If you hit the bell, you get notifications to your phone when I post, so you're not missing brand new videos come out. And I would also really appreciate your feedback on this video. You know, what do you guys think of it? What are important things that you really wanted to add down below in the conversation? And I'd love to know what you guys think of Mariah. If you have listened to her before, what is your favorite album? What is your favorite song? Like any information, because I love to talk about Mariah, of course. To those who have been watching my channel for a long time, you know that I am a huge Mariah fan, and so it took me a lot of effort and, you know, watching all the interviews and all these things to put this video together. And so if you enjoy it and want to share it, that is definitely something that I would appreciate, as this is something that I've worked very hard on. The first link down below in the description is going to be my latest second channel video. I'm also going to have my Twitter. A lot of times I've done Twitter spaces where we were talking about Mariah specifically. If you just go to my account and you hit the little search bar and then you just type in like spaces I've spoken in, it pops up there so you can hear us talk about Mariah, and that was really fun to do as well on Twitter. And then I'm also going to have my Instagram, my Spotify if you'd like to follow me. I'll also leave a link down below to stream Mariah's music, as well as I'm going to try to link all the stuff that I referenced in this video. There's a lot, so I don't know if I'll have to make a Google Doc or anything like that. And lastly, links to educate you guys on important situations. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one.